You are now listening to the Low Hanging Fruits podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Chop, chop, chop.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. Finally to another podcast episode of the Low Hanging Fruits. I am Lauren,
I'm Bhang Duck.
I'm Constance.
and the three of us are here to relitigate Star Wars beefs one more time. We've got the Star Wars sequels this time because we did the prequels last time.
I think we have two more episodes. We can do the original trilogy, and then we can do like the ancillary material. It would be fun to do Rogue One, Solo, and Andor.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think we could do. I think it might make sense to do that. We'd have to be a bit selective with what other material we want to engage with. But yeah, we could do more Star Wars. I'm always down to do more Star Wars. But you know, I mean, we've got 3 films here to talk about, and they're the longest of the films. All three of these, I think, are the 3 longest Star Wars films. So there's a lot.
So
I found myself feeling that way. You know, the weird thing about Last Jedi is that it doesn't drag too much. It's pretty long, but it felt really tight. Whereas, like, a couple parts of Force Awakens and literally all of Rise of Skywalker felt really tedious.
yeah,
it is. It is quite painful, especially with 7. It kind of, you think it starts off slow, right? But then when you think back to it, you're like, well, there's not too much going on at the beginning, really, and it's kind of they have to like rapid fire introduce the main characters, and the problem is there's like 3 or 4 of them, depending if you include Kylo. So, and it kind of alternates between like, okay, we're with Poe, and then we're with Finn, then we are with Poe and Finn, then we're with Finn, and then we're with Finn and Rey, and then it goes.
Poe just vanishes from the middle of this movie.
Yeah, then he returns. Yeah,
he's just out. He's just out for like an hour.
Are you talking about Force Awakens?
Yeah, Force Awakens.
All right. Well, let's start there then. Let's pop off on Force Awakens. So I guess a little intro to this film. I think I remember seeing this one in theaters the night that it came out, and I was super excited for it for like ever. As soon as I found out they were making it, and I followed all of the like little press releases, everything that they marketed, every tie-in, and I was really into it. I wanted to know more, and the things that intrigued me the most were like the new designs around some of the costumes, because they didn't let on too much about the characters and the plot really, but I wanted to know which actors were coming back, and I wanted to know more about like the new Stormtrooper stuff, and obviously Kylo Ren was pretty big for the for teasing the film. But they gave this one to J.J. Abrams. Do we want to talk about that?
You know, I actually don't hate J.J. Abrams. I actually went into this. When I first watched this movie when it came out, I was super hyped for it, like you. And I was actually, I didn't like Star Trek Into Darkness, but I actually kind of liked his Star Trek remake.
Mm-hmm.
I know it made a lot of Star Trek fans mad, but like, nah, Star Trek movies don't have like how can I put this? There's been a lot of bad Star Trek movies, you know, or just and so Star Trek movies don't really come with like I feel like a Star Wars movie needs to have a certain seal of quality. And if a Star Trek movie is just fun and fine, then I'll accept it, where I'm a lot more critical with Star Wars. I don't know, maybe that's fandom bias because I'm more of a Star Wars guy, but
well, I think
I didn't really hate J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. I was looking forward to this. I watched Super 8.
Yeah, I liked Super 8. I actually liked that one. Probably my favorite Abrams film, Mac.
What's actually kind of funny though is that like with J.J. Abrams, it was kind of a punchline on like Red Letter Media that he should have like directed the Star Wars sequels. Like that before that happened, and it
Yeah, a finger on
At
the
the
monkey's paw curled.
yeah. When like 7 came out, it'd be like, okay, well, prophecy, I guess. But then we get to 9, it's like, oh, ooh, that ain't gonna age well.
Well,
Yeah. Well, when we were
J.J.
watching these
Abrams.
films, the thing that you kept saying, Bang, was that it seemed like JJ's kind of he's a competent director. He's probably good to work with. You know, there's probably a couple ways in which he's the type of person that you'd want to have on a project like this. And I could kind of understand.
Yeah.
I could kind of understand that. I feel that. I get that. I do think that for Star Wars, and these days I don't know, but I think at least going into it, you know, if you're making the first Star Wars movie since Revenge of the Sith, probably you want to be grabbing somebody who isn't just like a safe, competent director, but who has like a really strong vision for what these films are going to be about. And there's a few moments. I'll even grant there's a few moments where I think how JJ understands Star Wars kind of peeks through. There's a couple bits. Mostly it feels like it's all over the place. These two JJ films. That's my opinion.
I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories about, you know, doing Disney, like Kremlinology on Disney to try to figure out what happened. But The Force Awakens really does feel very designed by committee. There's a lot. It's clear they had a lot of the original Star Wars crew on doing design work. They had a lot of old hands, a lot of like the actual. I feel like the special effects people had more creativity allowed, but I also feel like the writers, the people who are doing the writers, like these, like Finn, Ray, and Poe feel very like committee designed. I remember, you know, in the lead up to it, Poe kind of being sold as like Wedge Antilles from the old Legends. Ray is the new Jedi, and Finn is a. There's
also pitches as Jedi a bit.
Yeah, they did do that.
Misdirection, yeah. Which
he does hold a lightsaber. He does fight with a lightsaber, and I think twice, right?
Yeah.
So it's not.
It's hard to know how much of that is intentional misdirection versus like just not necessarily wrapping that back up final film. Because it definitely, there's a couple parts of Force Awakens and Last Jedi that you can see setting Finn up. I guess we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
So we get the opening sequence on Jakku. We see our friend Poe, BB-8. We see Kylo Ren.
Lord Santeca, or whatever his name is.
Yeah, and we get
everyone's favorite.
Eventually Finn and Phasma in that scene as well. And this is the part of the film to me that feels the cleanest and the most efficient. Like they really workshopped this part, I feel. Like just introducing everything, having everything work out just right. Like the stormtrooper gets a little blood on Finn, so we know which one is him. We follow him. And there's a lot of moments. This is something I like about this film is for the first few scenes, there's a lot of little moments of quiet interspersed with the action. And it reminds me a little bit of A New Hope, in that you kind of got moments in between. Like, you got your stormtroopers fighting the rebels, you've got your Tusken Raiders attacking Luke. But in between there, you've got the droids walking around, and you've got, you know, there's like Luke on the farm and stuff like that. And it really is, it sets the film up kind of slowly and deliberately. And I like that. I like giving it time to breathe. I felt like if we do an episode about those films, we'll probably have a lot to say about George Lucas and how he sets those films up. And this felt strong, cutting to Rey, and she's kind of inside the Star Destroyer, scavenging parts. There's that practical effect that we took notice of, where she adds the water to like the food, and it like expands, and then she eats it. Yeah, that's kind of a neat little detail. There's a lot of nods to the original series and some of the like rep stuff, TIE fighters, Star Destroyers, the pilot helmet that she puts on for a minute.
Yeah, where she's kind of supposed to be a Star Wars fan, basically,
This,
or Luke Skywalker
I
fan.
I also want to say this movie came out in 2015. It looks really good. I have some there's like a couple of specific moments that look bad. I think the Wrath Towers look pretty bad, and there's a scene where the Millennium Falcon is lifting off from Jakku, and the cloth physics on this piece of cloth that it's half covering it looks really bad. But overall, it looks really good. And the look of this movie is interesting to me because it doesn't look like the rest of the Disney Star Wars. Like nowadays, the Disney Star Wars look is super influenced by Rogue One and by Episode 8. It's super clean, and Force Awakens is much more J.J. Abrams style. Everything has like bisexual lighting, red and blue. It's very softly lit and warm. There's a lot of like contrasting colors and a lot of reflective surfaces. It looks really interesting. A little overdone in some places. Some of the backgrounds are a little rough, but it does feel, but it has an interesting look to it, which doesn't come off so much. It comes off later in the film once we start doing a lot of interior stuff with like green screens. It's not so obvious
I do
on
kind of
Jakku.
wish that we had gotten a whole trilogy directed by one director, just because it would have been nice to have kind of a consistent aesthetic with the films. I always kind of liked how the George Lucas's original trilogy versus his prequel trilogy kind of had there's a lot of commonalities between them. He's the same guy. He has a style, but there's elements of them as well where he is very fixated on like making certain things a little flashier and faster, and the banter feels a lot more like written out by him in the prequels, as opposed to you can kind of tell um in like the original trilogy. It sometimes feels a bit more plotting, and like he's giving the actors a little bit more room to breathe. And they did have different like directors on for those films. In particular, people always talk about the direction of Episode 5. I feel like this, in the way that film for me kind of stands out in that trilogy, Force Awakens kind of stands out in this one a little bit editing wise. Last Jedi too, I guess, in a sense. But like you said, Last Jedi, and I think, which one comes out first, Rogue One or Last Jedi?
I think Rogue One came out first, and Rogue One created a ton of props. If you look through any contemporary Star Wars like show set during the Empire, there's Rogue One props everywhere. There's so many of those sand troopers and the little stug drivers, and they reuse the Rogue One stormtrooper uniforms. I'm not sure if they're all reused for the Mandalorian, but I think that the Death Troopers certainly are from Moff Gideon. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rogue One, super influential on the look of the rest of these movies because of the prop work they did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a gorgeous movie.
I think of the new Star Wars films, I think Rogue One and Last Jedi are the best looking. But I do kind of want to give Force Awakens a little bit of props for the setting forward an aesthetic that does, I guess I'd say it feels consistent. I know that you mentioned the Rathtars, certain like CGI elements are not, like, there's been a lot of advancements even since like 2015 with that stuff. So I guess it's hard to be critical when you know that they're trying to put forward something that is gonna look dated. I didn't hate that sequence too much, but I did want to talk a little bit because we skipped over a couple scenes. So we see Finn and Poe on the Star Destroyer, and these Star Destroyers from this film look a little bit different. And you had a nitpick about the TIE fighter. Being,
I have a little nitpick. I have a nitpick about the way J.J. Abrams depicts weapons popping off of these. He does it 3 times early in the beginning of these movies. First, when the built-in blaster pops out of the bottom of Poe's X-wing. Then there's a dual blaster cannon on the TIE fighter that Poe and Finn steal. And lastly, the look of the point defense turrets on the Star Destroyer are the way he shoots them. You don't get a clear sense of where they're supposed to be positioned on the craft, and it kind of just looks like there's like a textured plane and then a weapon pops out, and it's not really clear like where they are or what they're doing. It feels kind of like they feel like insert shots that I don't know. It just feels a little. It feels like, and I'll come back to this. It feels like J.J. Abrams doesn't really care about like building a continuous world. He just cares about getting each moment to feel like it flows into the next one.
Yeah.
Without much care for the. It's kind of dreamlike.
There is a certain action association momentum between the scenes. And it does bug me a little bit, because when in the Escape from Jakku, when Finn and Rey meet, Rey is getting into an altercation with some thugs. They fight. She has a dust up with Finn. She knocks him down. Then the stormtroopers show up and they run away from them. The TIE fighters show up and they have to fly away. And there's a admittedly pretty cool sequence where they're inside the Millennium Falcon and they're going through the Star Destroyer. I thought that was neat. But then
they're going through the upturned Star Destroyer, I should say.
Yeah, the one that's crashed on Jakku. And then from there, like that's basically like 4 back-to-back action moments. I guess only 3 if you count the stormtroopers and the TIE fighters as the same, but they are kind of like 2 separate sequences. And then there's another thing where they then escape from they get away from Jakku, and then immediately there's like some sort of gas leak in the Falcon that is like an existential problem, and Rey has to fix it. And then they get like caught in a tractor beam and they're getting boarded, and then they meet Han and Chewie who have pulled them into their ship. And
we go immediately into the Kanji Club and the Guavian Death Gang.
Yeah, and then the gangs confront them, and that's another moment of danger. And then the Rathtars escape, and then they escape from the ship. And it's just like at least 5 to 7 back-to-back moments of like life or death peril. And it does kind of feel like George Lucas would have like stitched those scenes together a bit more coherently.
He would have had a moment where Rey like is like, I hate sand. It's coarse and gets everywhere. For a long moment, and then like Finn would be there and be like, yeah, you want to repeat that for me one more time?
Yeah.
See, people make fun of George Lucas's dialogue, but they remember it. They make fun of George Lucas's dialogue, but they remember it.
Yeah. But you wouldn't remember much, if any, of the dialogue in this movie.
Yeah.
I feel,
I'm right. I'm Finn.
Yeah, that is true. There's not a lot going on with the dialogue. I like Harrison Ford's dialogue in this film. He's always nice to see. I have here in my notes, somehow Han Solo has returned.
It's kind of fucked up that we meet him doing the equivalent of selling Michael Vick dogs, right? Like, that's kind of weird.
Well, he is. I mean, the film
divorced dad energy.
The films are like, one thing that I do like about these films is that each one kind of has a little commentary on some of the previous films. And in particular, they seem really interested in this idea of Han Solo or characters like him as sort of living on the margins of society and being in defiance of the law and even morality. There's a scene like that in all of these films, and this in this one, it's he's working with gangs to smuggle dangerous animals in
For
captivity.
fighting rings.
Yeah, they don't
I
go
think.
into that too much, but it can't be
And
for
he lost
anything
his own
good.
crew.
Yeah, and a lot of people have died. Apparently, he used to have a bigger crew. I think he says.
Which makes it a little weird because one of I think the better I think it feels like we're sectioning off the whole Kylo Ren section.
Yeah,
But
I have a note here that's like my next note is a couple of the things about Kylo Ren.
but just to continue on with like the Han Solo, there's a really nice scene where he is talking to Rey and he offers her a job. He gives her a gun and he says, "Hey, I'm thinking of taking on some crew." And it's a good little moment because this is something that presumably Rey would want, the chance to adventure with Han Solo. But it's already been undercut so heavily by the fact that he got his last crew eaten by tentacle monsters that it comes off really flat.
And then there's also there's several little spots in this movie which seem to hint that Han or Maz Kanata know who Rey is, or
Yeah, when we
where
get to
there's
Maz
there's a
Kanata's
cut off.
palace.
Yeah, there's like a cut off shot of Maz Kanata asking Han,
And that is
okay, who's the girl?
that is a parallel to a scene where the First Order reports that the rebels have escaped from Jakku, and Kylo picks up the officer and he says like, "What girl? What scavenger girl?"
Yeah, he gets really agitated too. Specifically at that, he just was done wailing on a computer, and it's just hearing about a girl, and that's never.
It's interesting, right? Because some of my next notes here are about the Snoke hologram that we see and Kylo and Hux's dynamic.
Before we leave the Millennium Falcon and Han Solo, can I elaborate? I think I told you about this when we were watching the movie, but I have a specific continuity gripe here that I think is really kind of lethal to Rey's character. So when they're running through rewind all the way back to Unkar Plutt's gas station, they're running. Finn and Rey are running to escape the First Order TIE fighters. They're looking for a ship. Finn says, "What about that one?" Rey goes, "That one's garbage." Of course, it's the Millennium Falcon. Their initial ship gets blown up. Garbage will do. They go inside. Rey can fly it. And she knows Unkar Plutt installed a compressor on this ship. So presumably the Millennium Falcon has a ton of upgrades. That's kind of its thing, right? It's a Corellian YT 1300 light freighter with a bajillion aftermarket upgrades. So presumably Rey would know that ship isn't garbage, right? Because she worked on it. She says later, "I didn't think Unkar Plutt should have installed that compressor." So she would know that it's a good ship. And also, when she's talking to Han Solo, she's like, "You're Han Solo. This is the Millennium Falcon." She's surprised. But she's been established as knowing a lot about mechanics and knowing a lot about the Millennium Falcon specifically, and knowing a lot about Star Wars lore. So it's just weird to me that she would know who Han Solo is, know what the Millennium Falcon is, but not wouldn't it have boats will have name plaques? There's it's a pretty distinctive ship.
Well, they might have done when they stole it from Han. It traded hands a bunch of times. They might have done the equivalent of filing the serial numbers off. Yeah. I do. Yeah, that is interesting that she has clearly worked in or on or around the ship. When she says it's garbage, I always assumed she just meant it was very old. And then of course you cut to the really heroic Star Wars John Williams track as the camera pans to the Falcon. I don't know. I mean, I think J.J. Abrams just really likes his little misdirections, um, and I think it's just meant to be a kind of cute moment where he shows you something that you weren't quite expecting,
Yeah.
but in a way that creates a lot of fanfare. That's usually how he does it. Um, there's
Alternatively, you could read like Ray as just being like a really bad Star Wars fan, not knowing what the Millennium Falcon actually is.
yeah, it's interesting that she's like incidentally kind of a parallel to an Anakin Skywalker or a Luke Skywalker character. Um,
Mm.
but like Luke does have kind of a himbo energy about him, so I kind of get that. But Anakin's kind of a kid genius on a lot of levels. Like he builds his own protocol droid from spare parts. Uh, you just I kind of have to assume that he's way smarter than all the other kids he knows. He can fly a pod racer. He ends up destroying the droid control ship. He's a force prodigy. He's not a genius, but he's really good at a couple things, and I just don't quite. It's always been kind of hard for me to see where Ray fits in that kind of that pantheon and that dynamic, and we've talked a little bit both before this podcast and now about like Ray as the Star Wars fan or Ray as like a Jedi fan or whatever. And I think there is a little element of self like or audience surrogate or self insert or however you want to interpret that. I wonder. I feel like I'm disposed to be a little bit more critical because these films are newer. But if you think about what Luke's motivations are, he mostly like his eventual motivation for leaving Tatooine with Ben is that they kill his family, the Empire. They kill Owen and Beru. But even before that, it's really less that he wouldn't have gone because he didn't have a reason to go, and more that he wouldn't have gone because they were still alive. So removing them is part of the moment where the hero answers the call. Like he says, "There's nothing here for me now," and that's a perfectly fine moment of writing, pretty standard. But before that, like Luke gets really caught up when Ben's talking to him. Like he loves this idea. Oh, I had a father. He was a hero, and I could be a hero like him. Like it's just that in and of itself is enough for him. So I wonder if maybe there isn't something like that going on with Rey, where people are kind of critical of what her motivation is supposed to be. But does she really need one? Her life sucks.
Yeah.
Like just the idea
Maybe
that
she has a
could
boyfriend, a cute boyfriend.
the idea that she could get to do anything new and fun or go to another planet. Like her number one moment is like she gets to fly a ship and she gets to see a bunch of green forests. And that in and of itself is a moment of characterization for her because it's the first time that she's seen another planet like that. Kind of like Anakin seeing Coruscant for the first time. And I don't know, like there's something about her that really makes sense to me in a way that I guess maybe to other people she doesn't quite come across as quite real or believable. But I think she's just like around. Like I don't know, if you told me, hey, listen, you could have magic powers and a lightsaber and be a legendary like warrior for a dead ancient space religion, I'd probably just go do that. I don't know if I need a reason. That sounds dope.
It's not like her ambient level of danger goes up all that much.
Yeah,
It seems like
not until Kylo captures her, and she has the premonition with the lightsaber. At which point she's already in it,
Yeah.
So it's adapt or die. So in that respect, actually, she's a lot like Luke. I think that it's a very similar situation.
J.J. Abrams doesn't write a lot of like drama between these characters. I think we're about halfway into the movie in terms of the Raptor sequence, like Takadana. Like, if you go back and watch A New Hope, Han and Luke don't particularly like each other. They have a really like fractious relationship.
In A New Hope.
In A New Hope, yeah.
Yeah, and
And-
Kenobi is kind of there to like make sure they're not like at each other's throat, basically. It feels.
Yeah. And
Because
and
it's
so
just
there's a
job
lot
for
of
Han.
drama between these. There's a lot of like there's a lot of points where they disagree on, and there's some really sweet moments when Han shows, oh, he's not so terrible after all. And moments of like in the trash compactor scene, which is why the trash compactor scene is important, because Han's arc through that movie is going from an immoral scumbag to somebody who does something genuinely heroic, giving something very valuable to him up, his own freedom, kind of. So it's that little action sequence in A New Hope is actually really important to the character development. And there's just nothing like that in The Force Awakens, which is really notable when you go back and rewatch it. Like, there's momentary disagreements, and it doesn't like Finn and Rey's relationship after she immediately sees a black man and calls him a thief. Their relationship, like, maybe she doesn't want to actually have sex with him right then and there, but they seem pretty chummy. There doesn't seem to be any particular grievance between them. There's not really much drama.
Quickly.
Yeah. They all get along with Han Solo.
And it doesn't seem to bother her that he lied too much. Or the film doesn't linger on it. When she finds out, no, he completely lied. Your entire relationship with this man is built on a lie. You know, like he was just deceiving you for his own benefit, basically, to get away from the First Order. And then he does actually walk away from you when you don't do what he wants. So actually, Finn's kind of a scumbag to start out with. And I like that about him. And I think that he gets kind of an arc, but it's an arc in the way that, like, you know, in the way that you're throwing something if you sort of like drop it into a garbage bin as you walk past, you know? Like there is a technical arc, but it's very short and it just arrives exactly where it's supposed to. And I think that these films could have done so much more with him. And it's really, Force Awakens really exemplifies, I think, that lost opportunity.
I think people who get really hung up on him, on like Finn's lack of a character arc in episode 8, I feel like they don't recognize that in episode 7, Finn is really characterized as somebody who's kind of driven by like base goals. Like he wants to be away from the First Order. He has like a level of nobility about him in the sense that he's not about to commit war crimes, but he's not really like, that's kind of.
But he's a conscientious objector, you know? Like this film is more like if you think about it, like Star Wars as like Vietnam War kind of like parallels, you know, versus the prequels kind of have this like before the rise of like fascism and the fall of democracy, this kind of like Weimar element to them. The original trilogy has this kind of like, you know, the space Viet Cong is the good guys kind of air to them. And I think that these films are sort of confused about that, in that they're sort of like the same message. The metaphor is the same, but we're seeing it more from the the American GI perspective with Finn. And I think the idea of a character like that is super interesting. But also just like you really need to let that breathe in this, and it feels like Finn's arc basically lasts from 7 to 8. That's where his arc goes, and what I don't even know. It seems like he doesn't kind of have one in 9. Like they just don't give him enough.
He has like 3 lines in episode 9.
He's really not as present in that film as you would hope. Also, that we'll get to that film. All right. Before we get to the assault on Starkiller Base, let's round out a few things.
Maz Kanata
and Takodana. What do we think about Maz Kanata?
I can't stand Maz Kanata. I can't stand Maz Kanata. I'm sorry. She does nothing in these movies. She's like a worse Yoda. She's really my least. She's my least favorite part of episode 8. Honestly, my least favorite part of episode 9. I think it's so funny
That's
every time they
incredible
cut
that you
back
would
to
say that.
Princess Leia's. Every time they cut back to Princess Leia's corpse, Maz Kanata is just standing over it, like she knew Princess Leia, like they were big like fans going back for ages. I dislike in episode 8. They call Maz Kanata just to like be a plot anchor.
Mm-hmm.
She has like no personality beyond delivering exposition, and like random, like mysterious nonsense.
And trying to make Ray just accept that, you know, she's gonna wield the Child Killer 9000 from now on.
It's super
Yeah.
goofy, honestly. Yeah, now that you say that, I feel like her speech to Ray is really really bad and awkward, which is unfortunate because I don't otherwise hate the character. But I don't like that there's this whole moment where the film stops to be like, by the way, Ray, this is your destiny. It's like you couldn't have like left that unsaid, or you couldn't have like just not said that, because it's like, what does that change about the outcome of this film? Nothing. Not adding destiny as an element of this changes literally nothing. And also that was never like a thing that happened with Luke that I can remember, where Ben was like, by the way, Luke, it's your destiny to blow up this Death Star. And Luke's like, oh,
It's
okay,
Darth
thank
Vader
you.
who talks about destiny.
Yeah, well,
Right?
and it's also Darth Vader who's the character who's concerned with destiny, both in how people treat him and how he treats the world. It's how he talks to Luke, and it's how the Council and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan kind of talk to him. So
And
that's
also,
a character
yeah.
quality of him that I think has been sort of like transplanted onto Star Wars generally, because people just talk like that. It's kind of like how if you watch like a medieval fantasy like film, you know, something that's clearly kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Rings kind of setting, but also like the weaponry is mostly medieval, kind of a Game of Thrones type situation. Occasionally, if it's poorly written, people will just randomly thee and thou each other out of nowhere, or say things that like in compared to the other dialogue, which is very modern, will just not like, you know, like it just sounds out of place. You know, George R. R. Martin is a really good writer, so you don't really get that from the dialogue that he writes. But occasionally, if you guys watch like a nerd property film, you'll notice this where like, I don't know, a character will just say something, and it's like, that's not how people talk. Nobody talks like that. And if you're gonna build a series where nobody talks like that, then they should talk like that all the time, you know, and that should be constant. And the funny thing about George Lucas is that he kind of did that. He kind of made a series where characters say things that like you just don't say, and actually in a couple of cases he made it real. Like people at some, I've heard people say the force, may the force be with you and stuff like that, kind of ironically, but you know, it's just interesting that he had kind of a motivation for this, and it feels like there's a lot of form without function, I guess, in how people have replicated his style, not really understanding why.
And
There's a lot of function in the original trilogy and in the prequels. There's a lot of moments that people don't realize are actually holding up a huge amount of the movie, because they're done so like cleverly, and the exposition is so subtle that it like
I also
that it
I think the
it
guy
skips under people's notice.
I think the guy who played Jar Jar Binks deserves the world's biggest communal apology. That dude really held up half the sky in that narrative, because there's a whole component implicit in that film. We're talking about the prequels now again. You know, it's just a whole component in that film about like imperialism and like civilization versus native society, and you know, it's almost like so on the nose that it's weird that people missed it. But like Jar Jar Binks is to a lot of us kind of obnoxious and silly, but he's not like that weird among his people. He's just like a normal weird guy, you know. He's I don't know, like who's like just a wacky personality, you know. I don't know.
He's the Bill Burr of Oda Gunga.
No, he's like the Robin
my
Williams of Oda Gunga, but he doesn't have any. He's not likable. He's like an unlikable Robin Williams. You know, he's not doing a bit.
Right.
He's just goofy. And the Gungans don't like him because he's clumsy and obnoxious, but the things about him that are obnoxious to us are all cultural signifiers. His way of speaking, his mannerisms, things like that. But that's, I mean, it's interesting, and I have to assume this is intentional with George, where like he created this society, and it's like, man, these amphibian people and their culture, they're also, dumb and goofy, and they're like a waste of our time. And it's like, no, that's how Obi-Wan thinks of Jar Jar before Qui-Gon corrects him. Like that's in the film, like it's just kind of bizarre. And you have to think, oh no, that's our mindset, like that's our cultural mindset, because we're acting from within our frame of reference.
I never minded Jar Jar. I think maybe if I was around and like if I was like aware of Star Wars in 2000 and everything was like Jar Jar Binks like sippy cups everywhere, I think I would get real sick of him.
I was into Jar Jar back then. I remember those times, and I don't regret any of it. But people have really had a reaction to that character, and I think that there's elements of Star Wars that are like built in like that are just maybe not that much, but just a little bit smarter than I think people kind of give it credit for. And this film kind of feels like that sometimes, but it's sort of in reverse, where it's like mimicking that language without kind of intending all of the same meanings or using it in a coherent way,
It doesn't really have anything to say except that fascism is bad, I guess. Speaking of fascism is bad, I think we haven't talked about the 7'2" jacked femboy in the room.
Ah, yes.
Well,
So
actually, I do want to say something else about the Maz Kanata, like exposition, like the castle, and when Rey gets like the saber. The only reason that she finds the light side, the Skywalker saber there is for fan service purposes, basically, and for her to like just get like the "it's your destiny" talk, which, as we just explained, is more of a Vader thing, where Vader is like, you join me, Luke, or like, oh well, it's my destiny to serve the dark side, so I just gotta do it. But like, Rey's like quote unquote like awakening feels like, when you tie it to like a fan service like sequence where like, she holds a lightsaber, and then like she just, there's a whole bunch of like references to like Empire Strikes Back. We hear like even like Obi-Wan. We see the Knights of Ren, which aren't gonna come back up until like episode 9. And the sequence that we see in the dream sequence or whatever, that's never really explained. It's just kind of there. And like, I feel like that whole like castle sequence, if you'd taken like Maz Kanata out of it, they just found another way to like, tie Rey to like the whole like to get her on her path, like realizing that, oh, maybe like she's got something in her, like the Force or something. And not like tie it to like, oh well, I now have like the laser sword of Anakin. That could have been like more productive, but
yeah, it also feels like a very unassuming place to find that lightsaber. You'd think that if the point is that she's discovering something of significance with a real legacy behind it, you'd think that it would be found in a place of significance. But it's just it just happens to be in the place where she was, and also like, I guess Maz is kind of this mysterious and wise character, so the fact that she has it isn't crazy, but it is a little odd.
Could have been interesting though, is if there was like a connection with like Lance Ortega and Maz, and then the lightsaber, right? You wouldn't get like a Force flashback kind of thing, but the lightsaber she would get would be the green one, Luke's lightsaber. That could have tied into that could have tied things better, I feel, because at the end of the movie she would be handing it back And so when you get to episode 8 and he throws it out, you'll be like, wait, what's going on? And it could be, a little bit interesting because Palpatine, in episode 6, he talks about the lightsabers with contempt, like it's a Jedi weapon. So Luke just forsaking the lightsaber could be like interesting misdirection to like maybe hint that like, oh, something's gone wrong with him, maybe.
Yeah, I like Luke's green lightsaber. I'm really sad that we barely see it in these films. Everything goes
It's an
back to that
anti-green lightsaber bias.
Yeah, but the green lightsabers are so pretty.
Yeah.
Rock. I love them. Most of the films have blue lightsabers in them. Have more green.
Yeah. Where were we? Kylo Ren.
Yeah, Kylo.
Everybody's favorite, the best part of these movies, everybody's favorite part of these movies. Adam Driver's an amazing actor. Ooh. Oh, he's beautiful and jacked. He's remarkably beautiful in this movie.
Yeah, it was kind of on purpose, because when he takes off the helmet and he looks like that, it's like, wait, it's sort of like the movie like trying to wink at you to be like, oh, there's something going on here. He's just not going to be some
The
burned
face that
horrible
launched
guy.
1,000 ships.
Yeah, it's not going to be like some burned guy or some fucked up guy who's like mangled face. It's like, no.
I mean,
Yeah.
what is there to say? Adam Driver's huge. He has incredible physicality. He's gigantic.
It's really interesting because I like the idea that Kylo Ren wears the mask not for the utility of it, the way that Vader's mask was. It's designed to be like an intimidating projection of somebody who actually really needs a breathing apparatus, which is sort of in parallel to like actual like there have been like rulers and like warlords in real life and in history who have worn masks for practical reasons. There was a famous like king or general or something who was a leper. If memory
Baldwin
serves.
from the movie Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah,
Baldwin the Fourth of Jerusalem or something.
something like that. Yeah, there's been like movie depictions of this character, and I think that's like basically who Darth Vader is. Whereas Kylo is an imitator, and that's interesting. I think that's a neat bit of characterization. The Kylo Ren characterization in these films is mostly spot on. I think he's in hindsight kind of a bright spot.
Adam Driver is incredible. He hams up the role a lot.
He does
and he
a
hits
lot
that
with
note. He hits that note that you really want to hit with a movie like this, where like you just need somebody with incredible like screen presence to keep the audience invested. Harrison Ford does this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Adam Driver, he's also like the emotional heart of this movie.
Mhm.
It really feels like it's mostly Kylo Ren's story.
Yeah, which is why I said like he's kind of sort of a protagonist. It felt like of course he's supposed to be one of the bad guys, but also you get a feeling that the reason we get peaks at like Kylo Ren just getting angry and then just freaking out when he like hears about the Millennium Falcon, it's because like of course we're gonna care about like the son of Leia and Luke and I was gonna say Luke. I mean, holy shit. That could have been a plot twist. Like, actually, Kylo Ren isn't the son of Leia and Han. It's
He's the son of
it's of Luke and Leia. That could have been a plot twist for the ages, but no.
Han.
Yeah.
He's Chewie's son.
Okay. Can you imagine if like he took off the helmet and you saw it was a Wookiee, a sort of half Wookiee, half human? That would have fucking sent a lot of people in for a loop. You've been like. Yeah. Also, we have to like remember this with these movies. People like had theories of like, okay, who is Rey and who is really Kylo? There was like theories where like is Rey just a Skywalker? Did they somehow like she ended up on a planet and like are they like there are people who like going on about like Rey and Kylo ship has been like, that's incest. They're actually both Skywalkers. And
I-
Technically,
I was
it's technically
so-
still incest.
yeah,
We'll
yeah,
get
yeah,
to
which
that.
is where
I was
like
so
if
sure
in fact,
that she was. I believed that theory that she was a Kenobi for the longest time until Last Jedi came out, basically. Because in this film, they use like audio clips of Alec Guinness calling out to her. They edited the line from A New Hope where he tells R2 "Don't be afraid," and they took the word "afraid" and cut it so he says "Ray." And I just think that that's really interesting.
which is maybe one of JJ's little things where he just sort of kind of
It just does stuff.
Yeah,
he does kind of just do
cool.
things sometimes.
There's also things with like later on in the Force fight where people even at the time noticed that like Rey was doing like stabbing, it's like motions that kind of look like Palpatine, which kind of
that would be if it wasn't 100% correct, it would be the dumbest theory I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Dumbest. The dumbest theory you've ever heard is Darth Jar Jar, which some
All right,
people
all
to
right.
this day still believe. It's one of those things where it's like a conspiracy theory became so funny to believe that people started actually believing it.
Yeah. So,
all right.
So Kylo Ren.
Before that,
the First Order. I like the First Order. I'm a sucker for all the Imperial stuff. I like all the evil stuff, and the First Order with their big Nuremberg rally grounds on the super weapon, the flags, all of the.
I think that is one of the most coherent scenes in this film.
Yeah.
In retrospect, we have to say in retrospect. So we have Hux, which is another character we. So Hux is like does like the big speech, at the Nuremberg rally where they like destroy like entire planets, and he kind of just ends up becoming a joke by episode 9. Like he's just like kind of like dismissed. He's just like shot, and we never hear from him again. There's not even like a satisfying final confrontation between him and like Kylo, even if it's just like Kylo had taken like a lot of pleasure out of just finally having a reason to kill him. There's nothing.
Hux is a fun little guy. Hux is a fun guy.
Yeah, he's the birthday boy.
Yeah, which so in this movie he's meant to be like, oh, he's like the true believer. This guy believes 100%. But like with Kylo, you kind of get the impression that like that he if you notice, like what Hux is the one who wants to like fire the weapon, and if you look at that scene, Kylo seems to like not jump, but like he sort of looks at him, but he's like, oh, why are you doing this? Like, God.
He's on a Star Destroyer. He's on another, right?
Yeah, and he kind of watches the blast, and it's kind of implied because you can't see the face that like he's not 100% on board with it.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it's ambiguous. They don't give him like a weird like, because Darth Vader has a whole thing in Hope about like the Force being the greatest weapon, and he doesn't.
Presumably, maybe the reason he doesn't exactly like this is because he's gonna feel like the disturbance, the force of what's gonna happen, and since he's not fully on the dark side, it's gonna be like conflicting. I don't know, something like that. Maybe reading too much into it.
I don't have a huge issue with Starkiller Base. I know a lot of people were mad that it was like another Death Star. But following on like the metaphor that the Death Star represents nuclear weapons, I kind of like that. I kind of like the escalation. It makes sense that, they had the A bomb and now they have the H bomb. That's not terrible. What I don't like about it is the mechanics of it and the way it's not really integrated into the story. We just kind of find out about it. And the First Order uses it to conquer the galaxy. And it's not really clear how it works. Like the Death Star can travel around the universe. You know,
Yeah, it's a space station. And
yeah,
also it
that's-
doesn't have a single beam that it fires. It has like a, or it doesn't have like an energy storage like the way that um Starkiller Base does, the Death Star doesn't.
yeah,
Like the one thing that I really always liked is the way that in, especially you can see this in the Return of the Jedi, the beams like kind of conjoin and become like a single beam. So it's got like that big like radial like dish that it fires from. I like that. I always liked that the way that the Death Star is constructed, and you see the inside when the beam is kind of like firing down the tunnel. It's kind of like a rail gun, a nuclear rail gun. It's a neat concept. I like it, and yeah, you just don't see as much of Starkiller Base.
and it's a little goofy. It does, like, the Death Star feels like at least plausible, right?
Well,
That you could build something like that. It's a little exotic, but it's not, you know. But the big trench carved out of Starkiller Base, it's just silly. Like, you look at it and you're like, well, if that was a real planet, wouldn't like the gravitational force crush it? Like, it couldn't sustain that. It's too.
yeah, 'cause
It just looks
taking
wrong.
it takes the star's energy into it.
Yeah, that energy should crush everything on the planet's surface flat.
Yeah,
And
whereas
it's
you'd
it's all
think
these
that
little things.
you'd think the reason why they use that planet is because of all the crystals.
Hmm.
Presumably, the whole point is to like conduct energy through them to magnify it into a powerful ray. So they didn't really even need the whole like siphoning the sun thing. It's already plausible, sort of inherently. It's just like a visual component of the final battle.
Yeah.
You would have had to change almost nothing about the film to not have it take the sun's energy. So it doesn't make a ton of sense. It feels like that element of it was written just so that the film would have that visual language at the end, where Poe is like, "Oh, you know, as long as we still got light, we've still got a chance." And there's like a
As long as the sun is, yeah, which is supposed to be probably ties into Kylo being sun, like as long as there's like light, and yeah.
Also, so they could pull out the withered Wojak of the name Starkiller.
Yeah.
That's
and
true.
it's
Actually,
literally
yeah,
Star.
I forgot.
It wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
That's such a literal mindset. Like it wouldn't have to literally kill a star to
Or
be
could it?
like
It feels
Starkiller
like a
Base.
combination of two expanded universe super weapons. It's a mixture of the Galaxy Gun, it fires through hyperspace, and the Sun Crusher, which is Natasi Dala. The infamous Natasi Dala Sun Crusher, which is a tiny ship, like fighter size, that could fire a bomb into a star that would blow it up and destroy a whole system of planets. And it's kind of like in the middle of these, and also the Death Star, but it's kind of the worst of all worlds, you know. It takes kind of the goofy power level of the Sun Crusher and mixes it with the kind of like, I mean, all of these are kind of stupidly powerful. I like the Galaxy Gun, but it just mixes all of these super weapons up into something that's a little extra at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it that honestly, it just feels very unnecessary. And saying this now, I fully believe that the entire premise of how Starkiller Base works mechanically was reverse engineered to create backwards from wanting to create a scene where the light fades to like a red glow as Kylo and Han Solo have the confrontation on the bridge, where like all the light fades, becomes all like dark and ominous. Like I think they wrote that, and then everything else was written for that. That's my conspiracy theory for this podcast. That's my thoughts.
I mean, thematically, yeah, it does feel like a bit on the nose that, like, of course, there's the Starkiller Base is going to drain, like, you know, the light out of the sun, while there's an actual like son of Skywalker that's gonna commit patricide, and we're gonna tie it up to like when the sun literally like runs out in the sky. So it's not even really that subtle.
No, the opposite.
It, yeah,
Mhm.
which would have meant like finding a way to like if they wanted to like do this, they would have had to like maybe like show that like when the weapon fires, it yeah, I don't know how they would have like been able to tie in like the the planet what like the planet going dark right as it's about to fire. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it does
We
seem
do.
like
Oh, sorry.
uh,
Go ahead, Bang.
Oh, I was gonna say that it does. It doesn't quite have the energy of the Death Star trench run either. It doesn't have that like. It doesn't have that. Like, it doesn't have much presence on the screen. Like the Star Killer base in
Yeah.
like in terms of like how characters react to it. Everyone seems very businesslike. They're like, well, another Death Star. All right, here we go.
Well, they seem very spooked by it in concept, but like I guess it's just so big and impossible that they kind of do what they do in Rise of Skywalker, which is they show up with like virtually no plan and they just kind of win, and then it's just ridiculous and then they win. Um, that which I think actually works better in Rise of Skywalker than than in this one. Um,
Yeah.
I genuinely think that I remember the Lego Star Wars version of this level better than I remember the actual film, and I just rewatched this film with you, and I honestly can't remember much of the X-wing sequences.
yeah, well, because it in episode 4, the X-wing sequence was kind of, was kind of a focus. There weren't like two
There were
other plot
three
threads.
separate
Yeah, it was 3 separate. So it was, yeah,
Yeah,
because
it's
you
a bit
had
much.
you had Finn and Ray. There was originally going to be another like an action scene where they steal a snow speeder here. You've got Finn and Ray. You've got Han and Kylo, and you've also got Poe on doing his job.
And
Poe's a very
then,
workmanlike character in this movie. He kind of just it kind of feels like he's grooming Finn into the Resistance. The way he acts around him. Like, I know it feels like, oh, whatever, they're gay, but like within the context of the film, it does kind of feel like he's kind of like being really nice to Finn in the hopes that he'll get intelligence or something out of him.
huh,
I think Poe is sort of a true resistance rebel in that he comes off as having like big Starklighter energy, the way that the rebels from the original trilogy are just so charismatic and dope and chill all the time. Even when Han Solo is being a jerk or whatever, they're just
Yeah.
they're just extra charismatic about everything. And the rebels in these ones are or the resistance, they're very grim. Like I think that they convey that they understand that they're essentially doing something that's impossible. And I like that, and then also you do notice the elements of it that stick out, which is Oscar Isaac is so charming, and by contrast, most of the other rebels just like feel like they're about to roll their eyes and be like, "We're all gonna die," basically.
Yeah.
That's their that's their vibe, and to be fair, most of them do. So they're right.
90% of them do die.
It's you feel bad because you can't even really be critical. Like in in Star Wars, I don't think most of the actual rebels in the rebellion live, but I do think that most of the ones that we meet in the films live.
And post Andor, you kind of get the sense that when the joining the rebellion is kind of it's like you kind of get the sense that like your people are ultimately given the choice of like die fighting or just get killed for no reason. Like the rebellion does kind of retroactively have this kind of like dead man walking kind of vibe,
well, and
which is interesting.
I
But
think
that's later. That comes way later.
I think that the thing about Andor we'll have to do an Andor episode, to be honest. We'll just have to do an Andor episode because
mm,
and maybe we'll do like Andor and Rogue One together or something. But I just think that's a really great way of understanding and kind of relating to an element of fascist power, and how it just sort of lashes out at people who aren't even the air quotes intended targets of its bigotries, because by that point the Jedi have mostly been wiped out, and the few that are still alive are completely on the run. They're being purged, and there's whole sections of the Empire set up to do that. But also, like being an Imperial is just taking the ability to have like cathartic power over people beneath you, and you can do whatever you want to them because you're a member of the Empire, and they're not. So there's like something going on there that I think is kind of interesting. A lot of the characters in Andor kind of remind me of like what it was probably like to be a bit further out from, like, geographically further out, but still regionally adjacent to like European fascist movements, where you've heard of these groups that are fighting in wars and killing people, but maybe you get to experience it for the first time when they roll into your small town. And Andor does a great job, I think, of showing like all these little characters and their individual lives and how they react to stuff like that. And for this, it's very uniform, like the Star Wars films are always much more romantically focused on individual characters. So there's not as much like it's not as vignette heavy, so it kind of feels like you don't have to really be too invested in like what is what's the one guy's name who's he's in Rise of Skywalker. He's like one of the X-wing fighter pilot guys, one of the lead guys, kind of got a beard, heavier set dude,
Snap
taller.
Wexley, Temin.
Yeah,
Snap
Wexley. Yeah, that dude. Like, what's his motivation? Who killed his, friend or mother? Or where did the Imperials roll into his small town? Like you never.
There's a backstory. You can look them up on Wikipedia.
No, I'm not saying that there isn't. I'm just saying that you don't get that from the film. So like.
Rest in peace, Jessica Pava, and I think Jessica Pava dies, right?
I know Tally dies.
Rip. Rest in peace. Every beautiful woman that tags along with Poe Dameron just eats shit.
Yeah, man, the female fighter race is getting obliterated in these films.
Yeah,
that was cool to see more and more female like resistance fighters. Kind of, they were in some roles definitely, and you could occasionally see members of minority groups in the rebellion. But most of the female characters were unnamed or in like leadership or diplomatic roles, which is still great. But I don't know. It's just nice to see like the female fighter race or the female ground soldier or something. Because these are human beings or beings just fighting for their lives against something completely inhuman and destructive. And I do think that second half of that is really communicated well in these Star Wars sequel films. You definitely get how destructive the First Order is, for sure. And you do kind of get a sense of their ideology in the first two of these films. But I guess what else do we have to say about Force Awakens before we move on? Because we've lingered on this
X-Wings look
one.
really good.
The
X-Wings look really good. I like the Resistance X-Wings.
Chips look good. Yeah, I agree. The fight
I
in
have
the
the
forest.
Lego one. The fight in the forest.
Yeah, I guess we could go on. When this movie came out, one of the things that the quote unquote fanboys like couldn't get over was that like Kylo like quote unquote lost the fight with Rey. And like none of them seem to have factored in that like throughout the whole movie they show us the like bowcaster wrecking shit, like throwing people like 20 feet away, like it's just like this stuff's really powerful. And so Kylo, like after he just impales Han with his lightsaber to commit patricide and commit to the dark side, Chewie just like nails him in the gut with one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then like it is shown repeatedly that like he's like struggling, like he's like literally hitting his wound to like tap into the dark side or something, and just when he's like toying with Finn.
Mm-hmm.
And people like didn't get like not only that was Kyle like kind of fucked up there, and he obviously just, well, next movie it's like basically said that like he instantly regrets like killing Han,
I don't
and is like
understand how
torn up about
people.
it.
Yeah, I don't understand how people forget about the Force midway through watching these films. We are talking about a universe where there is essentially like a universal, like almost like deified kind of like uniting power that has a sense, almost like a sense of justice or balance or what have you. It has a sense of when things are right with the world and when things are wrong. It has you know different like relationships with life and death and fate and irony and all sorts of things and love. And you can call on it to see the future. You could all things established in the Star Wars films. You can call on it to do extraordinary physical feats. So nobody questions when Kylo Ren is able to tank the bowcaster. Nobody questions when he's able to fight in the like whatever sub like 0 degree like weather in that snowy forest on a planet by a failing star. That planet has to be going to like Kelvin, like 0 Kelvin, real fast. That they have to be
Take
so
time.
cold out there.
Well, I mean, the energy of the star. Sorry, I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson here. The energy of the star
Yeah.
is actually preserved. It's transferred into the planet, so you should still get heat, and it would take time for that to radiate into. Anyway.
Possibly. Possibly. I guess
Anyway.
it is. I guess the planet's also exploding. So granted, but it's a snowy forest. It's cold. It's cold as hell out there, and I just don't understand how people can forget about the fact that, like, I don't know, like. Does anybody ever just think about like how sometimes in a movie God is real, so magical things happen? Like if this was like the Passion of the Christ or whatever, nobody would question that Jesus can multiply bread. Uh,
Nobody would be like, "How did he come back?"
yeah,
They never
right.
explained.
They never explained that. No, it's goofy. Like and like when Ray does something ridiculous or when Finn does something ridiculous, it's literally anything can be explained by the Force favoring them, just at base. And that's not even getting into the fact that Kylo wins his fight against Finn pretty handily. Takes him out pretty quick.
Yeah,
Doesn't
he's
kill
kind of
him.
playing with him.
Yeah, definitely doesn't kill him. He does, I think, midway through, like try to recruit him or something. He says something to him. I
He
can't.
says he calls him a traitor or something.
Yeah, but I think it's like when he's no, it's Ray when he's like got her up against the cliff. He offers to train her to teach her the ways of the Force. So he's not even trying to kill Ray. He's trying to capture her. His victory conditions for that fight are different from hers. Also, he knocks her unconscious at the beginning, so he's clearly winning. But like, and then the Force, I've seen people be like, well, isn't it lucky that she ends up on the other side of the chasm? And it's like, luck has nothing to do with it. Fate is real in this universe. Like, I don't understand how people forget this when it's convenient for them to make an argument. But anything that happens, it's like, oh no, you don't understand. They're christened by God. Like, that was a holy act. That was a miracle. Like, that's
Also,
what it is.
In the context of that scene, like Kylo has her over at chasm where he could have easily just like pushed her off and killed her there. But the point is that he doesn't want to kill her because he's probably is thinking about like taking on an apprentice, and then him not.
He's thinking with his
kill...
lightsaber. I'm sorry, everybody wants to fuck Ray in these movies.
Also, there's definitely that he usual like villain like gets like his like there's like the scene where he's basically told his fear that he's never gonna Ray tells him what he actually thinks and knows that like he's scared of like not being actually like Darth Vader or being as strong as and so like
also in the next film they literally tell you that Kylo's conflicted.
Yeah, but like here like him not wanting to kill her and then just like telling her to like kind of like reminding her to like, oh, the Force is a thing. Then she breathes a bit and then she kicks his ass because of course he's gonna be tired after like fighting it all that while injured. But yeah, this
I don't know.
and
It's
also yeah.
Okay, there are genuinely bad things about this movies, and this movie in particular, but there are also points where people just
They can't
hate.
read it.
Like, there's also people who just hate Ray. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know how to explain it. Like, there's things that I don't particularly love about Ray's character, but I think she's on the whole like fine. I think Daisy Ridley is a tremendously like if you watch interviews with her or you see in other movies, she's a tremendously charismatic actress. And she has an incredible physicality, and she's not really used to her full power in those movies because of what Ray's character is. But it's it's like fine. Like the problem, there are like writing problems, but like the problem isn't that they didn't make Ray a Mary Sue. The test to ask for me is like the test for being a Mary Sue for me is ask yourself, would I rather be this person? Would I rather have this person's life?
Mhm.
And I think Ray's life in general sucks so much, and she's kind of stupid. And these are that like I don't think she makes for a very good Mary Sue
Yeah.
archetype.
And
she also gets
also-
the crap kicked out of her in like every film.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. And also it's kind of shown that like she's supposed to have like survived on like a desert planet scavenging as a woman, and we see her like fight, with a stick, like a staff weapon. So it's all signaled of like she would be able to like, especially if she's like a little bit force sensitive, to like,
yeah.
put up a little bit of a fight, because if we think about it, like, yeah.
She's a tough cookie, and I don't I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to like create your protagonist, but she's a tough character. She's a smart, tough, maybe not very smart, but she's a tough, capable, and intentional character. Can we get on to the good movie? Can
Yeah,
we go
let's
on
go
to
to
the
the good one.
movie?
Let's go to the good one.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
All right, let's go. So Rian Johnson got to direct a Star
Brian
Wars
Johnson. Yeah, the Looper guy, Lupa,
Yeah.
Super Dupa, Lupa. Sorry, I really like Looper.
That's good.
It's such a charismatic little movie. I love how goofy it is. I love the dedication. Sorry, that's Looper. Rian Johnson, he makes good movies. He makes solid movies. I don't know a better way to describe it than that. Like he makes movies. He read the book on how to write a movie. He knows how to do a Chekhov's gun. You notice episode 8 starts with like a thesis statement, like leave those weapons, get every person to the transport. People are more important. He finds a simple Star Wars moral: people are more important than things. Something that people, something that's it's got a little meaning. It's got a little, and finds a way to apply it to every character's arc. Every character has a little arc in this movie. Hux. The episode 8 is good.
Yeah.
And where it suffers, it's because there are big setup problems. Like one of the episode 8's biggest problems is that Poe and Rey never meet. But that's
Until the
because
end.
episode 7 ended with Poe and Rey on different sides of the universe.
Mhm.
Like, and never having that in that movie. So like,
Yeah, there's so many like interesting like little arcs in this movie, because okay, so the movie starts with basically like a joke where like where Hux gets pranked by Poe, but like, and it's like really goofy. I remember like people when this movie came out, they were like, "Oh my god, they're making Hux a joke," and it's like, yeah, it's kind of is the point, but also they didn't notice at the end of this movie where he's kind of like trying to advise Kylo Ren to not get distracted by by Luke showing up and being flashy or whatever. He's like trying to tell him to be like, I've made this mistake before. I don't think you should do that. And then he gets like thrown at like thrown on a wall. Like it's But like that happens, like it is not belabored. It's just like shown in like it's very easy to like pick up on the moment like you think about it. And this movie has a ton of little moments like that.
It's good. So our plot.
We open with the base evacuation, like you already mentioned.
We'll start with a place evacuation.
Poe
We
confronts
speed run
Hux.
the events of Empire Strikes Back.
There's the bomber run.
Yeah. So Poe Dameron leads the Resistance's forces. It seems like this was a plan that they had, but they kind of decided not. Leia like tried to get them to stand down, but Poe leads a sort of a doomed attack on the Dreadnought Fulminatrix. Great name. Captained by Captain Canati, the grumpy, crotchety First Order admiral with a ton of character. He's clearing out our surface. He's clearing out our surface. We should have launched our fighters 5 bloody minutes ago. Captain Canati, everybody.
He's good.
And he's right. Like Hux, like literally trying to like just be smug and just showing off, does like get them in trouble there.
Then we kind of loop into our main. After they jump into hyperspace. The First Order follows them through hyperspace. They work out that Finn and Rose have a fun little scene where they work out that we get introduced to Paige Tycho briefly, and then her sister Rose Tycho. They're resistance fighters.
That's good.
Rose is kind of a mentor figure to Finn. She's like a dedicated resistance fighter.
So much so that she's in charge of like catching people trying to flee.
Yeah.
Well, and she's inspired by him, so it's sort of, there's a little give and take there.
Yeah. But she doesn't skip a beat to tase him. It's a great little scene because she has genuine reason to be suspicious of him, and Finn is trying to go save Rey. He's trying to contact Rey and tell her not to come back to the ship. So it's kind of a selfish desire. Like it's kind of selfless. Like he wants to help this other person. He's not. It's not really like a. It's hard to describe, but he is kind of quitting. He's kind of not. But he's doing it for Rey, only because he cares about her. But he has this great little scene where he bonds with Rose over their shared mechanical knowledge about they kind of work out the way the First Order is tracking them. They explain this it's a fun little scene. They have a lot of they bounce off of each other. They gave John Boyega a ton of lines. Anyway, they go to the Canto Bite, and the Poe Dameron on the Resistance kind of does this Age of Sail like chase thing where they're both they can't catch up to each other, so they're kind of bombarding each other from a long distance away. Reminds me of when Jack Aubrey is being run down by the French captain Duhamel in one of those Jack Aubrey books. I forget which one, but I like it a lot. Anyway, so that's the first 30 minutes of the movie in rough sketch. What are your points?
So I had a couple things I wanted to cover. From the scenes with the bombing run to all of the scenes with like Rey and Luke, to the stuff with Rose and the Canto Bite sequences, to the final fight at the end. One of the things that I noticed as a through line that starts very early is the editing is really strong. The editing really gets across the like poetic nature of the sacrifice and of everything lost, because this is the film of the three, I think, that's the most about loss, and it's the most about tragedy and the most about failure. And I think that is what makes it so poetic and interesting, because the Star Wars films up until this point were mostly not about that. And the one standout was Revenge of the Sith, which is very much about loss and failure on a lot of levels and tragedy. And I think that this film and that film, and maybe Rogue One as well, are the films that are sort of in that Star Wars tradition where you get a rare film that is very, very dark in that way, and they give you like a little sliver of hope and a little sliver of assurance that things are going to be all right. And I like that, and I think that you have to build to it, but Star Wars can deliver some really strong moments and messages like that.
Yeah, and in this film there's like several kind of, there's the explicit reference to like what happens in Revenge of the Sith with Luke later on, but also there's the whole there's the visual tells in the throne room fight, or I mean afterwards. What I really liked about this movie as compared to like Force Awakens is the way characters are introduced.
Everything?
Is yeah, but like the way characters are introduced is I like it. I like how, like, this is one of the criticisms I had, re-watching The Force Awakens, like noticing that it kind of just, they don't take time with the characters, but in this one they do, like, even if they don't like immediately like elaborate much on the character, they'll introduce like the way they introduce like Finn just like walking around, like out of his like Bacta suit and kind of like goofy, and like Poe just goes to him and just like is like, oh, are you all right, buddy, or whatever, and then Finn is just turns around and like asks him where Rey is, and then there's like the pan shot to like the whole sequence with Rey and Luke.
It's really neatly done. It's really neatly edited.
Yeah, and there's also it cuts, where's Rey, it cuts to the sequence, and then a little bit later on Luke asks where's Han, and it cuts to Kylo, which cool
little balance.
Yeah, cool little trick. Yeah, so it's almost Movie
I
isn't,
like it.
this movie isn't exactly subtle with these things. You would pick up on them if you could like remember a sentence and then the visual associated with it.
Yeah. For those of you who speak English, this is a really understandable. I don't understand people who dislike this movie. I did find the original, the beginning conversation between Poe and Hux a little awkward the first time I saw it. Now I like it.
It's very Poe like, and it's very. It kind of shows that, like, I mean, in the context of that movie starting, he basically, like, Hux basically knows that, oh, this is all the Resistance has. We just like blew up like the Republic, basically. So he's feeling himself. He's like, we finally have him, and we do find out that he's got them on a string, because he knows that like they can't flee. So he underestimates the Resistance there and kind of pays for it. Well, not exactly him that pays for it. It's the other guy who was like mad, like that it took like 5 minutes to scramble fighters to stop Poe. But there's a lot of like internal logic to like even those little moments in the movie when like this is not worth nitpicking as compared to like other things in the other movies where like, yeah, this doesn't really tie together that well.
There's a YouTube video that people should check out. It's by a channel called Pillar of Garbage, and it's called Woke Spotting Explained How the Grift Works. You can just search like Pillar of Garbage Woke Spotting. It's like one word. And it really breaks down this phenomenon of people online. And this is going to be the Star Wars podcast episode that is the most political, in the sense that I'm going to talk about some real political phenomena that have been happening in real life and tie it back to exactly what has happened with the way the public has processed these three films. The thing that has been happening is basically a few years back, around about 2014-ish, 2013 maybe. Don't quite remember the exact date. I think it was 2014. There's this little lady named Anita Sarkeesian, and she made some pretty uncontroversial and just funny BuzzFeed feminist style breakdowns of video games, and there was a group of people on 4chan who did not like that one bit, and they took to harassing her pretty bad, and a lot of the Chan board culture kind of metastasized around that harassment campaign, and it became very prominent and very common for people who were kind of adjacent to politics but not really politically educated on YouTube to make dunk videos talking about why Anita Sarkeesian got video games wrong. And this combined with some of the Gamergate attacks on Zoe Quinn, and all of the cultural fallout. There's an Innuendo Studios EndNote video for the alt-right playbook about this, where he breaks down the very basics of these events. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can go watch that. I'll try to remember to link it to people. But the basic idea is that there emerged this sort of, at the time, the way that it was put forward is that it's just a bunch of people with opinions who don't like that a woman is wrong. But that always sort of belied what the actual truth was, which was that there were these private group chats and stuff where this stuff was very coordinated. And there were a couple internet figures. The Internet Aristocrat was one of them, who really pioneered this dunking on people for being too feminist, which became just dunking on people for being too leftist and progressive generally.
Dunking on people for being Jews.
Well, they don't tend to say that most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of them, at least, haven't gone there. But occasionally one of them does, and it's not a mystery, because what happened as this was occurring was there's this guy named Steve Bannon who owns he had this little rink-a-dink online publication called Breitbart News, and he catapulted his publication into relevancy by essentially harping on the Gamergate stuff and riding that really hard.
Oh yeah, I remember Milo. One day he was dragging Gamergate for being losers, and then the next day he got the message no, it's time to hop on the train. These guys, they can bring us far, and he immediately changed his tune. I remember that. I don't know how old I was, but I would see these people just go to be oh, Milo's on our side now, yay! And this guy was calling you
a Nazi.
So not only was he Nazi, but not even a few days ago he was calling you a bunch of smelly nerds, and now you're groveling to him. Well, you have no fucking self-respect, man. And come on.
Bannon used the rising tide of this white male aggrievement to buoy his political connections in newspaper to get him a spot in the Donald Trump campaign for president in the 2015 to 2016 period. So you can see very directly how 2014 to 2015 to 2016 these events evolved pretty directly until Donald Trump becomes president. He's in the White House in 2017. And
Bannon's a guy who's openly bragged about reading fucking Evola.
Steve Bannon and Milo Yiannopoulos are fascists.
This guy is literally Bannon is literally Goebbels throwing out lines being the two men he respects the most are Hitler and Lenin, but Hitler has to be the first, but Lenin's a close second, and just provoking people to to just get mad at him and write about him.
It's Steve Bannon is a white nationalist, and if anybody hears that and finds that controversial, I think that's almost a separate conversation.
Not only is he a white nationalist, he's
Have you made it an hour and a half into this podcast?
Yeah, but he not only is a white nationalist, but he's the type where he's aware of the quote unquote esoteric stuff. He's the guy he's also a Heidegger guy, and to remind people Heidegger's sort of disenchantment with National Socialism is when the Rome Purge happened. like,
And
like he was like he heard like Rome talk about like the art like making the Nazi party a really like Arbeit party, like a party of like work and shit, and like he got purged
Well,
for
I bring up
many reasons.
I bring up
But,
Bannon
like
because he essentially took this movement and the rising what would become in part the tide of the far right and the alt right and a few parallel movements, and he rode that straight into the White House, and there was a pretty direct line from these like gamer bro harassment campaigns to putting like neo-Nazis in the White House, and somewhere along that involved the culture industry on YouTube, this little like culture warehouse that we have pumping out
yeah,
these
like
woke spotting videos about how there's a progressive thing in a movie and that's why it's bad. And
like with like the the videos where they would be talking about Finn and like the little white cuck ball.
yes, that's a Davis Arini article. Yeah, um,
Yeah. Oh
Davis Arini and
god.
Jordan Owen were two big Gamergate figures once upon a time. Um,
Yeah. Even
it's
wanted to make a documentary about it.
a lot of these people like kind of snuck their Nazi criticisms of this movie. Yes, if you don't like this movie, you're a Nazi. First of all, um,
Yes.
second of all, a lot of like the received knowledge about why this movie is bad. Oh, Ray's and Mary Sue, Finn, the Canto Bite sequence is boring. All this stuff is just like especially the stuff about Luke's character. It's just not true. Like these aren't criticisms. These are just like if your criticism of this movie is it kind of drags a little bit around the third act, or like I guess that's the main criticism, or some of the dialogue's a little awkward. Fine.
Yeah, there's
know?
even like I remember one of the big criticisms I would hear often would be the Canto Bite sequence. And I after like watching it again after all this time, I was like, that's not even where I think the movie kind of drags on. I feel it's all right. Like
well,
that's not
but
where like
that's the reason why they hate a lot of people. Here's the thing. I have to sort of
the
build
Rose
this
thing
in
where
because in part the point of bringing up this whole like mini history of these these uh this, like I said, like this cottage industry of woke spotting is that these YouTubers and these people writing these articles where they do this thing, they have developed their own like lingua franca for communicating with their audience to the degree that they maintain a plausible deniability that is like one step removed from the right wing. And then therefore their audience, by virtue of being every YouTuber's like the bottom 50% of your audience are inherently stupider than you. They are all that is always the case. So they cultivate an audience and they get 100,000 or 1,000,000 people to watch that video, and a lot of those people are just randos who just show up and go, yeah, they are mean to Luke Skywalker in that movie. Why is that? Who is Rose? What's a weird Canto Bite? What's a Canto Bite? I don't. Why are we here? They're people who have like political like dementia, where schools and all of their faculties that they have been exposed to in life, all institutions have completely and utterly failed to give them a political education. So they just move through things not understanding anything and not trying to understand anything, and barely aware of what it is that they're doing and why. And for that, they are a very vulnerable group of people who can be activated to a political end by somebody with enough, enough like fronts to put up to cover up the uglier elements of their analysis, And it comes through when you have, for example, and I have to name drop this guy. I'd rather not, but when you have like an Ethan Van Sciver type, big Comicsgate guy, kind of envision themselves like the sequel to Gamergate. Infamously recorded himself butchering with a pair of scissors a number of Rose Tico action figures.
Oh, that guy!
Cutting
Holy shit!
Yeah, cutting them up like he's like those serial killer type dudes who destroy sex dolls, which is a real phenomena, by the way. Look that up. There's some feminists who have written about that. It's very disturbing. But what is interesting is, those guys have a lot less plausible deniability because they're doing that thing that like fascist minded people always do, which is they feel so aggrieved that they just have to achieve greater and greater levels of catharsis. What we perceive as the mask slipping is them just spiraling out and getting more and more pleasure from acting up. And when he did that, everybody was like, yeah, this is serial killer behavior. But prior to that, he was relatively welcome in some of these circles. And, any one of these guys could do something like that, and maybe they'd be cast out and maybe they wouldn't. But I think the truth behind a lot of this is that it isn't really about the movie as a movie. And they want you to believe that. And if you believe that that's why they don't like it, then you're kind of falling for the trap. Because the truth is, why don't they like the Canto Bight sequence? Rose is a woman, she's Asian, and it's critical of rich people. That is why. And
critical of war, actually, which is interesting.
Yeah.
In the it's critical of rich people, but also the war profiteering, which
and critical of the systems and structures that enable and empower the characters who are the fascists in that film, also as a component of that.
And also, I guess there's like a certain component of like effeminate like care for animals, I would suppose.
And some of these videos, like if you just search here, let me open it up right now. I'll do it right now just as a demonstration. So some of these channels for about 2 or 3 years were still making Last Jedi videos. If you search The Last Jedi woke, what will you find based on metadata? Well, there's a Mr. Reagan video,
Mr. Reagan.
Here's Ben Shapiro, another Ben Shapiro. If you scroll down further, you can get your Mahler videos and your critical drinkers and stuff like that. All of these people, they don't have, or they shouldn't be treated as if they have plausible deniability. I think that's giving them too much credit. I don't think that everybody who doesn't like this film is right-wing, but I do think that is what somebody who is right-wing, who hates this film because they are, would want you to think that I think about them. Because they have to pretend that they're one of you. They have to. These people are lizards, like, not to be all like David Icke about it, but they are fundamentally trying to sell you on something that is inhuman because they have desires that are destructive to human joy. So they have to put on a mask and be like, no, I'm one of you, and I'm normal, and I hate this movie for normal reasons, and here's why you should too. No. You will know the false shepherd by his mark, and it is the check mark. You see it next to their name. Do not uncritically sit there and listen to these people. And when you watch those Mahler or Critical Drinker or Shadiversity or whatever, those videos, you sit down and you watch that stuff. Just if you do that and you're thinking that I'm full of shit here, do me one favor, which is the next time you watch one of those videos from one of those guys, watch the thing that they're talking about first. Just completely open-minded. Don't react to it or anything. Just blank slate. And then go watch their video and notice the thing that they always do, where they treat every moment of a film in complete isolation, as if it has no relation to anything else and is incapable of setting its own precedents. They dismantle things until they're unrecognizable so that they can essentially torture them like they're a serial killer with a small animal. It's perverse, and it's kind of sickening as an artist to see people engage that way. So yeah, sorry, that's just my rant about this, and my rant about kind of the hate for these films and the capacity in which it exists as an online phenomena, which also extends into the offline world. I don't see those things as totally bifurcated. But anyway, getting back onto the topic of the film.
There's a YouTube video by a woman named Jill Barrett, Bearup, and she's a stage fighter, and she did a breakdown of the Last Jedi throne room fight, kind of not stated as much, but kind of a response because that scene specifically got a lot of criticism from people who were like HEMA guys who were like, wow, that lightsaber nunchuck isn't very realistic. Actually, if you pause the movie and slow down, this knife disappears in between. Just little like persnickety little grievances. And I don't know. You have to accept. Anyway, this woman did a breakdown of like the logistical difficulties of doing a fight with 8 people that goes on for 3 minutes, where they actually light the whole set on fire in the middle of it. And yeah, it's not perfect, but like there's a lot of that just saying, oh, it's not. I would have covered in chips. Well, I just would have done another take. It just doesn't. It's a really unfair kind of argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and also this kind of goes back to the way in which some of these people refuse to see the Force and the supernatural kind of in this world. But like, weirdly, a lot of them are Christians, which kind of bugs me out, because like that how do you not understand this? But they will seemingly pretty deliberately just ignore the fact that these people have like precognitive powers. So they're inherently reacting to things that haven't happened yet, that you can't know haven't happened yet. And if multiple of them have precognitive powers and are involved in a single altercation, then there's so much interplay that goes unstated there that you couldn't possibly, like, how do you even represent something like that? I kind of don't think that people are thinking through a lot of their criticism. They have to be knee jerk. But if the thing is, if they're content creators and they're doing that, it's because they're selling you something, and they have to keep you stupid to sell you the thing. And that is what has instilled me with so much seething hatred and loathing for so many of these people, because they are essentially tricking their audiences, and their audiences, like a Nigerian prince email scam, it kind of self-selects for people who are going to fall for it. And I just don't appreciate that. I think that it's kind of wrong. Do we have anything we want to say about Canto Bite? Because we got that far.
Oh, I love Canto Bite. I
like
love a lot
DJ.
of it. The age of this sequence kind of shows in that this was some of the first like high class fancy dress Star Wars that we've seen. Since then, we've seen, like in Mandalorian and in Andor, we've seen a lot of really good high class Star Wars outfits.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is kind of the first time that showed up in the new canon, and seeing it on the big screen. I love the cop uniforms, the goofy cop uniforms. I love the way that the police are like playing poker or sabacc in the cells, while above them, rich people are playing the same game for like tons more money.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of little neat things like that. I like that we get to see a child attacked with an electro whip. That was something that before this movie came out, I think I said to somebody, like, the thing that I care about in Star Wars is that it's got to have like a little bit of edge of brutality. I want to see like a kid getting electro whipped, and my glee when I saw that actually happen in the movie was so incredible.
Yeah, I gotta say, I guess 2 things. One, I forgot to mention when Kylo and the First Order track the Resistance ship, the Raddus. They
named after Admiral Raddus from Rogue One.
Rogue One, yeah, which I like. I like that. One of the things that happens is there's that whole bit with Leia, where she gets kind of ejected into space by the explosion and she saves herself. What do we think about that scene?
It's people get so mad about this scene, despite the fact that it's literally fine. There's no like people getting ejected into space and surviving for a few minutes is like for up to a few minutes is totally plausible, especially in deep space where they're less likely to eat a bajillion roentgens of radiation. Um, it's fine. She has the Force. There's a little Mass Effect shout out, and just the way the command bridge is organized. I feel it's fine. There's literally nothing to be mad about in this scene, and the fact that people freak out about this is one of the stupidest things. It's one of those things where people just make up that they're like, somebody on YouTube makes up, well, the Princess Leia getting vaporized and then flying back is so dumb, and then people just repeat it. But like, I don't know.
I think it's weird.
Fine.
I think if you're implicitly, inherently, immediately disgusted by anything that's weird or strange, that's something to examine on your time. It's a weird sequence. Like I wouldn't have occurred to me to put that in there. I am used to weird stuff in Star Wars. But I don't know. Yeah, it's neat. I think it's odd that they thought to have that happen that way, because they could have just had Leia be somewhere else when the bridge explodes for some reason,
Yeah.
Like there's so many other ways to write this, and I do think it's interesting that they made that choice.
I think it's to put Holdo front and center, because Poe would never go against Leia, but he would go against Holdo. So it's to set up for his little mutiny.
Yeah, I guess Leia has to be kind of out of the picture temporarily. But they didn't want to kill her off.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight, maybe that would have been better.
No, I think it would have been worse.
You think it would have been worse?
Yeah.
Maybe. I do like her being around for the rest of this one, but we do run into some complications with her character that we'll talk about a bit later.
But it's like, I think one thing that people do who hate this movie is they fully put themselves into the character, so they fully empathize with Poe,
Yeah.
and they go, Admiral Holdo she should have just told him. She was ruining the fleet from everything Poe knew. He was, and go on and on. Oh, she should have done this. She should have done that. And it's like, it's not like Poe is like a 30-year-old bird colonel at this point, basically. He's in this to the death, right? Like, he's not
also demoted
like,
by the same.
It's not. Admiral Holdo doesn't owe him anything. It's not, you know what I mean? And I get that, I feel like people who are really I love Admiral Holdo. I love her relationship with Carrie Fisher. I almost cried the last time I saw it when they're saying goodbye.
You gotta love,
and then,
HEMA guys not understanding military command structure. That rules. Actually, never mind. I love these guys. I think
because
they're great.
Because the
I agree,
whole thing,
sad.
And the whole thing is they don't know how the Empire is the New Order is tracking them, and so they don't know if there's maybe somebody on board that is giving them that information. They're not sure.
Right.
So from Holdo's perspective, keeping that until she of course has to rely on a couple of people, right? But you don't want Poe, who just got his ego hurt by being demoted, and then Leia almost died and is in a coma. Why the fuck would you bet on giving this guy any in into your your plan that you're going to execute to try to save everyone as much as possible, and you want to minimize the possibility of it fucking up? And as we see later in the movie, there's a very good reason she did that, because exactly what there's a little bit of irony in that, because she held back on telling him it did lead to the exact thing that she was trying to prevent. But that's that's part of the narrative, right? It's not on her, within the logic of
It's not like she made a mistake. She made her orders to Poe very explicit.
Yeah, also, like, I believe, lectures Poe for the plan with Rose and Finn and everything, which I believe is how the First Order figures out.
It is, because the codebreaker, the master codebreaker tells them, not the master codebreaker, DJ, tells them, I think the implication is that he worked out, like, what would I do in this situation? Oh, I would cloak the transports and get out of there. And the First Order just don't think about that because they're so stuck in the mindset of having the biggest ship with the biggest guns on it.
Yeah, kind of like another
to them.
Stuck in their mindset.
Yeah, almost like they have to undergo some character development.
Yeah,
and learn to value things that aren't guns, which is a big insult to the HEMA guys, to the HEMA YouTube community.
Yeah, it's also a big insult to
I'm sorry,
like every
I didn't mean you.
Like, it's such like it's an encapsulation of like everybody who like just like most of the people who seem to like want like to idolize Luke Skywalker didn't notice that like the thing he does at the end of the original trilogy is literally throw away his weapon. It didn't click for you. It didn't click for you.
I love Luke Skywalker. I love Luke Skywalker specifically in Episode 6 and Episode 8. And I think Mark Hamill's statements on this have been taken wildly out of character.
When they were promoting the film and when he's giving interviews and stuff, everybody clips the stuff where he's like, wow, that's not what I would have done at all. But if you watch the clips, the way he says it is he's like, whoa, this is so shocking and surprising. What a twist. You know, because he just enjoyed being there and working on it. And you get that from the other clips of the interviews. Yeah, he's like, wow, you're really going to enjoy watching this.
He's acting his ass off. Like
this might be his best performance of his life in Episode 8. He's incredible as Luke. Mark Hamill should be in more things, honestly. I understand that he has infinite money forever because he was Luke Skywalker, but he should be in more movies because he's genuinely a really good actor.
Yeah, he was he's the professor in Kingsman.
Oh yeah.
He's been a couple things, but I agree.
Yeah, he really sells like what would
Mark
happen
Hamill's
to like
an incredible actor. He has genuine star power. It's funny that because he was Luke Skywalker, he's like he like voices the Joker. He voiced Firelord Ozai. He does some like he does some, I would say, fairly marginal parts, but like
he's in
damn,
Invincible.
He's really good here. Oh yeah, he is, isn't he?
He's a character in Invincible, yeah. And he is he's briefly in his voice is briefly in like a couple other like Star Wars properties that aren't the main films, but he was also in, looking at his recent stuff, he's in an upcoming project which I think is called The Machine. He's in a couple actually. There's a new Metalocalypse that he's in. That's great. I'm really excited to hear that. Yeah, wow, he's in a lot of little things. I did not know he was in this much stuff. These are all like post Rise of Skywalker too. Look at this. Oh, he's in What We Do in the Shadows, the 2020 series.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's
what I was
cool.
gonna say about Luke is that the thing that's good about Luke here is that he's agonized. Like if you don't like Luke's arc here because you think Luke should have been cooler, you just don't understand the way narrative stories work. It doesn't really matter if Luke is like such a great guy that you've built up in your head. What's important narratively is that he's agonized, because that's interesting. It's narratively interesting that he's suffering and that he's flawed. That's where you appreciate things as an audience on a level that isn't like that's like above like mashing Lego guys together. Like if you genuinely think this movie would have been better if Luke was like more perfect because it would have like fit with the character more that you have in your head. Like, do you just eat baby food all day? Like, do Do you want more mashed carrots and peas? Like that's not how stories work. That's not how good stories work.
Yeah, it's I think there's also the element of like, in the previous movie, Rey was supposed to be kind of, very vaguely in this movie, like in The Last Jedi, there's so many like in your face moments where like you feel like Ryan Johnson is just like smacking you in the face, like the whole exchange with Snoke and Kylo can be kind of coded like that, where it kind of reads as if like Snoke is just voicing what people were saying about Kylo being kind of a pussy and just, like he got beat up by a girl. Why? Oh my God. And just kind of like demeaning him.
Well, Snoke is doing this thing in that scene too, where he's humiliating Kylo Ren in front of Hux, and he's humiliating Hux in front of Hux's subordinates. But when they're in company with with each other, he makes them think that the other one is getting favorable treatment. He's like, it's a great little abusive relationship.
Yeah, and in this one,
almost
so
like Snokehead character.
Yeah, and in this one, like Luke kind of has to tell Rey, because like when Rey comes to Luke and just hands him the lightsaber, the implication there is that Rey expects him to just go out with a laser sword and just face like an entire military that's like basically just one, like just like annihilated like the Republic, and he's supposed to be able to do everything on his own. And it kind of like shows there's like the Rey's like naiveness, or just she was kind of like following orders, kind of.
But it also shows the flaw in the way Rey thinks about the world, because she sees Luke Skywalker and she doesn't think about a person with regrets and fears and trauma and hopes. She just sees power when she thinks about Luke Skywalker. She likes Luke. Rey is depicted as like a pure darksider in this movie, which I think a lot of people don't really pick up on. And I didn't pick up on it until I came back.
In ways, yeah.
I really love the way this movie like characterizes the dark side too. I'll get into that when we talk about like the Force bond that they have. But Rey is 100% interested in power, even though she wants good things. Like she's not in favor of genocide, obviously, but the way she goes about attacking these problems is, how do I get power? How do I use power? And when the dark side offers her something that she wants, she says yes. She doesn't even think about it. She says yes immediately. And Luke like mentions it to her. He's like, "Hey, this is a problem." And she says, basically, "Fuck you. I'm going to go down and look in the dark side and see what the dark side has for me." And I think that's interesting. It makes the dark side feel. It makes it feel important. It makes the difference between the dark side and the light side feel like something that like is understandable. It's to really be on the light side of the Force means to think about the impact that events have, to participate in a universe and not just master it. And the dark side is all about that mastery. It's all about it's very technological in sort of a Heideggerian way, where you want to reach out and produce something that you can control the world through. And the light side is much more of accepting the things you're not in control of, and that's a lot harder. But it's also it also doesn't lead you into these like self-destructive spirals, and that's a good characterization. It's thoughtful. It's interesting. You could really tell when you're watching this movie that Rian Johnson has a lot of love for Star Wars. He really like a lot of the characterization moments are drawn from things that the characters did and said in earlier movies. A lot of Luke's characterization is like that.
I wanna hit a few quick points before we get to the end of this film. So the flashback between Luke Skywalker and Ben, we already talked about Luke as a flawed character and what's interesting about that. I like that there's competing narratives introduced. Like Ben has his perspective, Luke has his, and then Rey kind of confronts Luke to learn the truth. That's kind of interesting. They have their little duel moments. I saw people get mad about Rey beating Luke in that duel, but they're sparring with sticks, and she pulls a lightsaber on him, which is sort of like pulling a knife in a fist fight. And also
Very dark
he's
side.
clearly like teasing her and not taking her seriously in that quote unquote fight, whereas she's giving it everything she's got. So that seems a bit silly, but I like Rey and Luke's relationship. I like when he teases her. I like when he explains the Jedi.
The Force.
Yeah, the way he explains the Force, but also the way he talks about the Jedi. He says, and I wrote this down, that they have a legacy of failure. The legacy of the Jedi is the legacy of failure. And I think that that's very interesting because that really fits with the major themes of this film, I think, quite well.
And also it kind of just acknowledges a reading of the prequels, which it wasn't always like that obvious, right?
It's textual. If you watch the prequels, like if you just try to interpret what's on the screen, it's textual, but it's not.
People are dumb.
For some reason, it's not evident.
Modern audiences, I don't think, are smart enough to understand the Phantom Menace. So you genuinely have to.
Which is a movie for children.
Yes, which is literally a movie for children. So I do think that sometimes you do have to come out and say things for them. Unfortunately, not doing that most of the time works. Like when Luke says the legacy of the Jedi is the legacy of failure, and then later on he's forced to confess to Rey that a huge part of why he's there is he specifically failed, as opposed to what she says earlier, where she says, "Well, Ben didn't." Like, you didn't fail Ben, Ben failed you, which is not true, actually. Luke, in a pretty big way, did fail Ben. And Luke's character kind of coming full circle at the end of this film is when he says to Ben, I failed you, because he's taking personal ownership over his role in their relationship. And what is interesting is that Luke was ready to be a son in Return of the Jedi, and people act like his character arc's over there. But just because you're ready to be a child doesn't mean you're ready to be a parent. And Ben or Luke is acknowledging to Ben, he's like, hey, listen, I wasn't good to you as a teacher. I didn't do right by you. And that's a different thing. Like, how can you say that somebody's arc is over because they learned to have a good relationship with their parents, and then you turn around and, like, 10 or 20 years later, or what have you, 15 years later or something, it's like, oh, actually... this is bullshit because now we're acting like they're flawed as an adult, which is so weird because just like you never learn how to be an adult, which is why adults go around making mistakes and hurting each other and doing bad things. So it's just bizarre that people don't understand that, but I think that it's a neat little moment, and I think Luke's character from point A to point Z in this film wraps up very nicely. And he finally gets a moment where he can do the right thing.
There's also a very interesting moment, in the same scene where Rey says that, like, Luke didn't fail Ben, but Ben failed him. Mm-hmm. Just before that, she says something like, "The galaxy may need a legend," which is interesting because it means that you won't notice that immediately, but he did listen to her finally by the end. So it makes that those like that conversation or the little conversations they have that much more impactful, that he's, and it also ties into the kind of theme that the Jedi should try to learn from their apprentice.
Mm-hmm. I always thought it was interesting that they brought back Yoda in this film very briefly.
Yoda's great in this movie.
He talks to Luke. I like that scene a lot. And I thought about it for a long time about what it meant that they chose to bring him back. And I think finally my answer is in the line when Yoda says to Luke, "We are what they grow beyond." He's sort of, being like, "Hey, listen, you've become the master now, and I need you to understand what that means." And he's giving him a little piece, I think. And the thing about that's so interesting to me is that he says we, and Yoda trained Dooku. So like that. In fact, Dooku was like one of, as far as like taking individual Padawans go, he was like one of like Yoda's last. And I think that that's so interesting that Luke trained Kylo, and Yoda gets to come back to talk to him essentially about that. And
Yoda's great at this.
it's just a fascinating little moment that I didn't think about too much previously. I like that they use the puppet.
It's the Yoda is very clearly one of the fan service moments. The twin sons and the Force theme are another one, but this movie is full of really well done fan service. I think the Yoda coming back, he's a puppet.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I love that he uses Force lightning. I really like Yoda's Force lightning here
He doesn't use
because
Force lightning.
well, I mean he does cause a giant lightning bolt to come out of the sky.
Yeah, he controls nature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The storms are already there, so it's different. I guess the different that just like
I think that's a pretty important
because
distinction.
My read on it was that like okay, so my read on it was that it was supposed to be an expression of Force lightning, and that the point of that is to really hammer home that the light side is more powerful than the dark side. Because when Yoda summons Force lightning, he does it to keep Luke from realizing that the Jedi texts have been stolen. He's doing it to help Rey pass on the Jedi legacy, and to make Luke face the prospect of letting go of his beliefs, and face how much the Jedi beliefs actually mean to him. And so when Yoda uses the Force lightning, it's something that we've only ever seen used as a weapon by the dark side. And here we see it used for good, and it's so much more powerful. It's so much huger.
I think the reason why I don't think of it as Force lightning isn't that it's not lightning that he helps to conjure with the Force. And I don't think of this as saying that the light side is stronger per se either. I just think that the light side philosophically is a different view of Force, where the dark side makes the Force instrumental to an individual person's will. The light side is about joining to the Force, and what's really powerful is the Force. That's what's if you're a light side user, that would be your perspective on it. It's not that you have power, it's philosophically that you are a part of something powerful. So, the Force comes from all things. It surrounds everything. So the Force is in that cloud, and the Force is in the tree, and in the fire and the lightning, and in Yoda and in Luke. And Yoda's a manifestation of it. So he's not, he is using lightning, I'd grant, but he's not doing the same thing that Palpatine's doing. Because what Palpatine's doing is he's bringing the power into himself and directing it. Whereas Yoda is just a part of something, and it happens. And I think that that's more powerful because the Force is more powerful than a Sith could ever be.
Yeah, and he just lightly lifts his finger. Basically, he doesn't even use his whole hand. So it kind of, it does suggest that he could have.
It's a great little scene. There's so much I could talk about this movie. Like the little things, like the way that Luke ignites the torch to go burn down the Jedi texts is there to remind us about Luke's lightsaber, because it's going to be important later on in the end. Yoda's great.
It's great.
There's also a very I only thought about this after watching this movie again, and this scene didn't jump out at me the other times I've seen this movie, but thinking about it now, it does tie into the end where Luke and Kylo are going at it. It's like it's the training sequence with Rey where she first starts with the stick, and then she takes out the lightsaber with the rock, and she just makes these motions. And then by the end, so the Rock has like a bunch of cuts or blemishes from her like practice.
From other lightsabers. My read was that it was an ancient.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, and what she does at the end is she cuts the rock, and then it falls and hits. It hits like the cart of like the I don't know what you call them, like the caretakers of the island. They're kind of like a bit goofy. So it hits their cart, and so it like just damages things. And now that I think about it, um, it's sort of like kind of a parallel to like what would have happened if Luke had just like gone out there and just like chopped the Kylo in half. I guess kind of the proof there would have been like would have just led to like another set of consequences down the line. And what made me think about this is that at the end, Luke kind of tells him that he's not going to be the last Jedi, and it cuts to Rey. But I have to wonder if that was it could have been a little bit more ambiguous in that what he's thinking about is that he's really going to get back at Kylo by basically like kind of humiliating him in front of his old army. And then we also get the pan shot of Hux, obviously kind of like pissed off that like Kylo didn't listen to him and probably wants to conspire against him in the next movie. And I kind of wonder if Ryan Johnson was thinking about like being like, oh, that moment of Luke deciding to just like not cut the annoying Brad in half and just like kind of fucking around with him using his force projection and kind of like sacrificing himself because Kylo kind of like would know how intense
He says it. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about the force bond, but like I guess we don't need to hit every plot point sequentially.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought about that.
I like that when Kylo and Rey meet with the force bond, the first time Rey is like mad, she wants to shoot him, but Kylo is like curious. He's like, "Oh, let's see, how is this working? What's going on?" It's a little wonderful humanizing moment for him because we don't really get many scenes with him where he's not doing something evil or doing something sad. I think it's really sweet. We get a little shot of like he's almost like a curious child, but it also shows the way the dark side is like he sees the force as something instrumental. I don't know, great little character moment.
Yeah, one of the first thing he does, that when he faces Rey is like try to force manipulate her, but it doesn't work. And then just a little while later, when Rey's like when Luke asks Rey what she knows about the Force, she says it's about lifting rocks and like tricking people and doing mind tricks, which is basically something that Kylo could have answered too.
Anyway, let's go into the end game on this movie because we have another 40 minutes of movie to get through.
Right.
Oh God, once we get to episode 9, I'm getting a little bit of tequila.
Yeah.
I am gonna
Throne room fight, good.
Very good. Yeah,
it's pretty dope. I like when he cuts Snoke. I like the Rey catching the lightsaber and everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's
the Holdo maneuver happens as well.
Oh yeah, the Holdo. Oh, I fucking hate it. They call it that. I fucking hate that. Oh my god, the fucking fandom rage about the Holdo maneuver when
I didn't fucking get that.
It might contradict something you've read in like the Star Wars Visual Dictionary in 2007, where it says that objects in hyperspace can't interact with objects in real space. But it contradicts nothing we've seen in the movies, so it's fine.
Yeah. The throne room scene was like when you first saw that in the theaters, like everybody was like that. You could feel it in the theater. I remember, like it was such a great moment to have.
Yeah.
And it's very like raw. You can the characterization of like Kylo and then Rey, like just in the way they fight, and also the level of skill involved. You can tell that like Kylo, like he's trained for this. He's probably thought about doing this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is it is kind of implied at the beginning where like he's get hit by Snoke lightning and he's kind of like looking around and he's like, God damn, you get the feeling he would definitely kill Snoke if it wasn't for the fact that he would like get gutted immediately after.
I like how casually Snoke uses the Force lightning. Like, there's not a lot of like.
It bounces off the floor, basically.
Yeah, that which is great. That rules. That he ricochets it. He trick shots him. He doesn't even hit him directly.
Yeah, he's not even worth a direct blast.
It rules.
Ultimate disrespect. Yeah,
and I love. By the way, this film is so well constructed in its final act with the color schemes. From the red of the throne room, the red of the guards, Kylo Ren's lightsaber, the salt kicking up the white over the red, just beautiful. The lasers sometimes there's the big laser cannon at the end, the battering ram. It's got kind of a red hue to it. Beautiful, rules.
Underrated little Star Wars vehicle from the end here. They had the First Order to drag the battering ram cannon around. They have these like strand beasts. They have these like nouveau walkers. They were originally going to give them like strand beast ATSTs. There was a Lego set made, but they didn't make it into the final movie. It's just a wonderful little like addition to the visual language. It really sells them as like technologically advanced.
Yeah, I like when they have little things
kind of
like
freaky.
that. And I like some of the additions they make to the AT-AT changes for this one, where they kind of have a new version of those as well.
Yeah.
More guns. They carry munitions kind of in their armor, which is neat. Yeah, it's dope. I love it.
I like that the design has a plot purpose, which is that at the end when Luke shows up in Force hologram, they need a bajillion lasers to shoot at him. So there's like a plot reason for these AT-ATs to have giant guns on their backs, which is to shoot to make it feel punchier when they all shoot at him.
Yeah, which is a great film moment.
Mm-hmm.
Just blowing the hell out of his astral projection, he dusts his shoulder off. I do sort of tying back that theme that you mentioned earlier, people more important than things. Rose saves Finn from doing a suicide run. I thought that was a pretty important little moment.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was unnecessary to the rest of this series.
Yeah, as was she. So if they both died there, not that much would change. Unfortunately. I do
want to point out.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, at the end with the scene where Finn and DJ are talking. DJ, don't join, and Finn says, all the hero stuff. You'll never get away with this. And DJ says something really interesting. He says, "Well, it's fine. They blow you up today, you blow them up tomorrow. Same difference. It's all the same to me." And Finn says, "That's not true." And DJ says, "Maybe."
Yeah,
and that was like a clear setup for what the next movie was going to have to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
Nope. DJ was right. He was right.
I mean, I noticed it when we watched beginning of episode 9, but like the end of this movie has a moment with Rey where like she has to like save the resistance from being blocked by rocks, and she of course like ironically comments about like lifting rocks and like making things float.
Yeah.
As like the point is like she's not doing it to just lift them and just like throw it at people. She's doing it for a purpose that's like higher than just like base and like mechanistic. But then like the start of like the other movie, she's just to show that she's powerful. She's floating in a forest with like rocks kind of around, and it's like, why? That's not what like.
Oh, and there's one last little thing that I want to talk about with this movie. At the end, there's another Force vision where Kylo and Rey see each other. I like that. I like the ambiguity of that because up until now, we've kind of been led to believe that Kylo Ren is using the Force to make Rey, or that Snoke is using the Force to bridge Rey and Kylo. Of course, in Episode 9, we may figure out that they're a dyad. I didn't really catch that. in episode 9. There was a lot going on.
Palpatine.
But-
says at the end.
People back in episode 7 were like, they were they had theorized that they were going to be something like a dyad or something, or like that something happened in the interrogation room where that's where like Rey's force powers got awakened, because she went back into Kylo's mind and then like kind of got a little bit of force knowledge that way, and it kind of like sort of a sort of like chain reaction, I guess.
I like the implication that they had some kind of remaining connection.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the interesting thing is that Kylo kind of ends like the movie in an even like more pathetic place, that he is supposed to be the supreme leader now, but he's basically on his knees, like trying to do puppy eyes at a girl that he was trying to like get to be like his empress, basically. And it's just like shuts the door on him.
Yeah.
And then like the next movie like doesn't like.
So episode 8, good. Should we put a pin in this movie? Anything else?
I want to hit a couple quick things, because you guys brought up most of the stuff that I liked.
The Luke Leia scene was sweet.
Yeah, I like that. When
And
Mark Hamill and Carrie
dice,
Fisher getting to have a scene. That's good.
And there's a little dice where like Luke hands over the dice from the Millennium Falcon to Leia, and then Kylo, when he's inspecting the base, he finds them, and then once Rey shuts the door on him, they kind of fade because they were like an astral projection as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Luke being able to touch Leia and hand her an object. Also demonstrates that if Luke wanted to, he could have killed Kylo there.
Yeah, and this is also...
He could touch him with his lightsaber.
And it's also implied by the fact that like the first Force, what do you call it? The Force vision, not a vision, but like when Rey and Kylo first connect, Rey shoots him with a blaster and he feels it. Like it hits him, and
it disconnects right as it's about to. So I think he kind of flinches.
Yeah, he flinches, but it could have probably been worse. But it does leave there that the implication that if the point here, if like Luke really wanted to kill Kylo, he could have, but that's not the point. Because what would happen? So, okay, he kills Kylo. Who's up next? It's Hux. So is that? So this is what kind of what I meant. I feel there was like a bit of like set up to the fact like Luke kind of knew that like it's better to have Kylo just be kind of a miserable supreme leader, and have him like sort of like be kind of haunted by not only Han but like Luke and Leia, and like the dice. Like he even leaves the dice almost expecting that like Kylo would find it, to really get in his mind.
There's some incredible stuff in here, like Luke and Kylo. Like Luke's death scene is great. Sorry, sure. You wanted to say something?
Yeah. I'll give you Bhang. I'll give you the last word on The Last Jedi, but I just want to insert a few things before you do. A few things that I liked that I wrote down here that we didn't get to. I like that the lightsaber is destroyed. Nice symbolism. I like Phasma presumably dies here. Not how I would have done it, but we do it. At least it means we get a Phasma scene. So, a little Phasma. It's not so bad. I like that the planet is a salt planet. I think that's dope. And this movie has the best creatures in it. I love the Porgs. I love I love some of the aliens that are in this one. I love the big riding animals. I forget what they're called. And I love the crystal critters. The little salt crystal foxes. Those guys rock. I love the idea of like alien planets with aliens that live on them that are like made of the same stuff. And I gotta go.
Okay, my favorite is the green the green milk dispenser.
Green milk dispenser, yeah.
No, but I don't get how people try to meme about that, but it's like you realize that like Luke Skywalker was like on a moisture farm in the middle of fucking nowhere, Do you know
Yeah.
how much gross shit he probably like, like quote unquote gross, like
Mm.
I'm sorry, but like the green milk is probably like for him it's
Oh.
probably a delicacy compared to what he grew up with.
He loves
So when you see him like he not only is he like doing that, right? But he looks at Ray and like he even like does the nice little like grin and he's like, isn't that good? And she's like all prude and just kind of like looking away and just being like, I don't know about this. Which I don't know, it's kind of a nice like characterization of like, oh, Luke is kind of a bit like Yoda now, where he's just like, dude, like he's kind of like poking and prodding and provoking. He's trying to like gouge who Ray really is. And in the script, it kind of goes like that because at some point, Ray stops following Luke and goes to the three with the Jedi
text.
And then that's when they start having a conversation for real, which is again, it's almost like they're trying to tell a story.
Yeah. Enjoy it while it lasts. Anyway, Luke has a great death scene. It's honestly great they killed him here because it saved him the embarrassment of being in the next one. Except, of course, they did bring him back. Luke's death scene's great. They play the binary sons. I love it because that's one of the most beautiful shots in A New Hope. And it's one of the most perfect special effects shots ever. But it's also something that Luke isn't appreciating at the time. He doesn't appreciate how beautiful the world around him is. He's just kind of vaguely annoyed at it. But then when as he's about to die, you get the sense that he values the world in a different way. It's it gives him this full character arc that's young Skywalker, always looking to the horizon. And now he appreciates that horizon. It's great. Mm-hmm. It's movies,
it's script writing.
It's really thoughtful. Now let's put a pin in that.
Okay, this is where I go get myself some tequila because oh my god, I start thinking about this fucking movie. God, I'll be right back.
The galaxy has heard a sinister message of revenge in the voice of the late Emperor Palpatine. The late Emperor Palpatine is the funniest way you could describe somebody who was thrown down a shaft and then exploded. I'm sorry. Like did he have a state funeral? Was it like the late lamented Emperor Palpatine?
Well, that's about as good of a transition into the next one as we can get. I'll try to we gotta try to be timely with this one. It is the longest and I have the most notes for it.
Okay.
So
we can just cut this into 2 episodes. People will listen to it.
I will smash it together into one giant episode and edit it like the behemoth that it is, that it deserves to be. This is one of our magnum opuses. This and the prequel episode. We're creating art here. We're creating something of significance.
Real art.
Yeah.
Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
So when I saw this movie, so I was like, oh, it's gonna be the last one, right? So fuck it, I'm just gonna get like the fanciest, like, I don't know, 3D whatever I can get and just whatever, let's have a ride. And all I remember of like watching that movie is I think about like at the midpoint, I felt like I was hallucinating, like the hurried, like frantic, like margin notes in the script from J.J. Abrams as I was watching the movie, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here?
This is one of the least memorable movies I've ever watched. I don't remember anything from this movie except I did like read the plot summary. I remember reading the plot summary more than like what actually happened. Like if I try to think back to like what actually happened on Kijimi.
I'm not even sure I could properly like remember the sequence of like things that happened in this movie
I
and
got
place them correctly. it is such a mishmash because it just keeps going and going, and it's so like I feel it's the problem I have with the start of
So
Force
so
Awakens.
Palpatine had a
10.
clone named Dathan. My son that I hate, Dathan. And Dathan fell in love with a woman named Mirmalnir, I think. Miramax. Miramir? Anyway, falls in love with this woman. And they have a little baby daughter that they named Rey, presumably after Grand Admiral Rey Sloane, the only other woman that Dathan would have conceivably known. So
What?
Yeah.
wait. So she actually was named
No.
by her parents.
she was named by her parents, Dathan and Mimi.
So
Oh
And-
my god!
I just want to
I
point
didn't-
something out to you guys. Just like a weird thing about these names of her parents, which are not important to the film. I've got us bullet pointed here from A to T. So we've got a lot of little things to touch on, but I've got the film organized structurally in a chronology that we can address using all the stuff that we talked about and observed as we were watching it. But I do want to point out about the names. Dathan and Miramir sounds a lot like Durin and Miramare, which is where King Durin of the Dwarves in Tolkien's Legendarium is buried in the waters of Miramare. So I just think that's kind of interesting. It's kind of a weird little parallel there for no reason that I could possibly think of other than it's another dead guy in a different film. But, whatever.
What I've heard is that it was named after a real person named Dathan, because they were named in a tie-in novel
Yeah.
that explained that Palpatine didn't actually fuck.
Which is incredible because people mostly make fun of the name, so that Dathan, whoever that Dathan person is, got roasted. Like that,
Oh yeah.
that's
No,
a
there was a
very
real
unkind
person named
thing
Dathan.
to do to your friend. I've never named a character after somebody like that.
See, this is so much funnier once you know that, like, for 2 or 3 weeks, Bhang couldn't stop tweeting stuff about, like, imagining the scenarios where, like, Damon and Palpatine just... like, it was just, like, Palpatine talking to Vader about his son, and just being like,
I still, to this day, and I'm being 100% serious, I still, to this day, regularly laugh to myself about a bit that Bang did on stream once where he I can't remember, but he did a Palpatine impression that really made me laugh while I was playing Overwatch or something. It was like,
Dathan, my son that I hate. My fucked up clone, Dathan.
and I'm even more fucked up than my other clone, Snoke.
No, Snoke was Snoke. Oh yeah, Snoke was a clone of. So Snoke was Rey's brother. No, uncle.
Okay, yeah, but like also I think in the canon it's also related to the Baby Yoda thing. I didn't follow that, but like apparently getting a hold of that midichlorian rich blood was part of finally getting Snoke right or something. I didn't follow exactly, but it's kind of teased in The Mandalorian.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Anyway, so Dathan.
sorry everybody, today we're gonna be
Sorry. Sorry. What were you gonna say?
yeah, it's so sad because Snoke in The Last Jedi seems so interesting. Even if he dies, the mystery of who he is, where he comes from, whatever, is kind of negated by the fact that that was me. I was kind of puppeting him all along.
I guess we could just throw the prophecy of the chosen one out the fucking window.
Yeah, and also so the fact that Palpatine was just hiding out in Exegol all this time, it kind of undermines one of the big things about in The Last Jedi that Luke goes on about for a while there was balance and then I felt Ben, and that it's kind of implied in a way that's kind of supposed to be a little bit of a repeat of what was with Anakin, where where like Luke didn't realize that, oh, here's my nephew with the mighty Skywalker blood. That's what he says. And I'm going to train him. Whoops, my entire Jedi Academy was blown up. Oh no, I actually did the very thing that I should have known not to do. And it's like, and the reason this happens is because the dark side was apparently vanquished because the Emperor is gone, which is why it kind of took over in like, in Kylo Ren. Nope. Apparently, he was hiding out this whole time, so the balance of the Force wasn't exactly, upset that much because the dark side was still manifest in Palpatine because he wasn't dead.
I should mention that there's a lot of like supplementary information that's kind of explained where Palpatine was coming from, what he was doing during this whole process. And when this movie came out, there was absolutely none of that. And I prefer to like take the movies as movies without supplementary information, except where it's funny. And the amount of information we get about Dathan Palpatine, and Palpatine being alive is so absurdly minimal that it's genuinely one of the funniest sequences in the movie because they just drop this on the audience. Like, people talk about how this movie is bad, but it's so absurd when Kylo Ren is like walking back the things he said to Rey. He's like, well, yeah, actually, they sold you to Unkar Plutt to protect you, And then anyway, I'm not gonna go through the whole, like, there's a bajillion like dumb dialogue lines and plot holes. Like,
I like
we could be here for like 12 hours doing that.
I'm a railroad you guys from here on out because we've been going for a minute. But I just want to say I like how it implies that when he like retroactively edits his comments about her parentage, I like that it implies that he was just being shit, like a guy who calls a skinny girl fat just to hurt her feelings. It's like, yeah, your parents were nobody, and then she cries and she's sad. All right, so something to like about this. I don't love that Palpatine has returned somehow, but I do like the opening sequence, the visuals of Kylo in the forest on Mustafar. I think that looks cool. I like the space chase sequence with the Falcon where they're jumping through hyperspace into different areas. I think that's kind of visually neat.
Minus probably, minimizing the flicker and all that, because God, that sequence.
Yeah. That whole the opening 10 minutes of this movie have an incredible amount of like flickering bright lights that to the point like it's pretty rough.
That's J.J. Abrams filming space stuff. Like, that's literally, it's my number one memory of his Star Trek films is just like bright light sheens shining across the glass, and it just like illuminating the bridge of Starship Enterprise. And it's not great. I'm not a big J.J. Abrams person, and Force Awakens is a very restrained J.J. film in a lot of ways. But in this one, there's not as much of that. So, yeah. Some stuff just not great. There's no praise I can give it that isn't highly qualified. I like some of the stuff in concept. What else do I like? I like the Virgin Hux versus the Chad Pride. All of their scenes together. I enjoy General Pride. He's kind of a good actor for that kind of role, I thought. The Knights of Ren. Bogus.
It's so funny. It's so okay. Their spaceship is rolling coal, which is just hilarious. Like, we've never seen a spaceship this shitty in Star Wars. Let's see. What else is great? I love the way that they show up, and the camera will always do like a pan through the Knights of Ren, like we know who these people are, or maybe they're a band. And she just stand around and don't really do anything.
The only reason that we know like that they're not just like kind of like dorks in like suits is because like the audience knows that they appeared in a vision in episode 7. They've never appeared in the actual physical presence of the movies. It's only appeared in Ray's vision, which
It would be really funny if they never showed up at all. It'd be really funny if they just didn't.
yeah, which I almost feel that they kind of like there's just like nothing to do with them. I feel in this movie, like they're just there to just like I don't know.
Incredibly underexplored, underdeveloped. Hated that because they could have been so cool.
Do any of them actually fucking speak?
No.
Don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think any of them speak. They they could literally like swap out the actors with like a sturdy like
I think
wooden stick and just like put on the armor on a.
I'll say this for the movie: J.J. Abrams might not. He might not like string stuff together so that it feels like a real thing that you're watching, but he does pay attention to like making plot relevant things hit certain beats. He does follow his Chekhov's guns. He sets up things that are plot relevant, even if the plot is stupid. It's set up and then paid off. Like there's like a functional movie here in a way that's kind of surprising considering how much of a trash fire everything else about this movie is. It's just way too long. It reminds me of one of those, like, I really like watching Chinese war movies, which are uniformly garbage, and they're all like 3 hours long. And this really felt like that.
Except at a very, very fast pace.
Yeah.
Which doesn't like let you to digest anything. Like why like in this movie the thing I keep asking myself when I'm watching it, or when I was rewatching it, is like, why should I give a fuck? And they never answer that. They never like hook me in with anything. It like if you think that like I'm just gonna be hooked in because Palpatine has returned, that's supposed to be enough. Like, who cares? He's not appeared in the other 2 movies. Like, and then like, oh, okay, so retroactively was the one not only manipulating like pulling the strings behind Snoke, but also he's like was doing like in Kylo's head using the Vader helmet as a conduit or whatever. It's like, who fucking
did Kylo
cares?
Ren think that he was talking to Darth Vader? Like I've never, like he does pray to Darth Vader's helmet, but I never thought that it was like, I never seemed like he was getting something out of it. He never seemed to me that he was getting anything back. Like it didn't seem like.
He seemed to hint that he had maybe talked to like in episode 7 he says like, show me again the power of the darkness. So there's like the implication that like he heard something, and that there's like a malevolent energy in like the Vader helmet. And in some concept art of like episode 7, you can see like a sort of like Anakin Vader hybrid where like one side of the face is like Anakin, the other side is like Vader. So there's like kind of, people kind of deduce that like there's, maybe there's something more going on here. But yeah, they kind of like, it does feel like JJ had to like neutralize that because that could have gone somewhere. They could have gone off track. So just having it be Palpatine is just, yeah.
It's yeah, I agree. It's weird. Before we get back to the plot, just a couple more notes that I want to throw at you guys real quick. How do we feel about Rose being written out of this one, Leia being kind of written out of this one, but also suspiciously still in it, and Finn and Poe not really having much of in the way of a character arc?
I mean, for every character who's not very important in this movie, it's good for them.
Yeah.
Every character, like I don't know what to say. Like every time somebody is just like isn't touched by this movie, it's good for them. Except for Leia, it's really obvious that Leia's dialogue is being like composited in. Every Leia scene. every Leia scene is like really awkward to watch in a way that like I found the Tarkin scenes in Rogue One way easier to watch than this. But it's really gross. I honestly don't. I don't know how to put it. I don't like that the death of Leia is like
It's made into a
compared
plot
to the
point.
death of Carrie Fisher. I don't like the idea that Carrie Fisher, a real human being who lived a full and pretty amazing life, is kind of like, it feels like she's just memorialized as a Star Wars character, which I feel like that's kind of it kind of icks me out. I understand people might feel differently,
No,
but
I do get. I feel that there were too much, like, the backlash people would have had if they had just like gone like, okay, we are gonna recast Leia for this one. If we're gonna have her in it at all, people would have not stopped.
I
With it.
I would have just written. You just have to ride Leia out at this point. I know it sucks,
but they would
like,
have complained. The
I
thing
think
is, they
it's
would have
the
complained
only-
about that
no,
too.
Nobody should have complained about that. The right thing to
Yeah, I
do is to write somebody out, and because for an actor, acting is such a personal thing. Actors care so much about their performance that giving an actor a performance built out of rejected performances after they're dead is so. It's so gross to me. It's so uncomfortable on like a fundamental level. It's like it feels immoral and evil to do, and I don't.
I think
Yeah.
I don't mind that they kill off the character. To me that's not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is how morose and dark it is to have this recent death of a real human being who was pretty, as far as I'm aware, pretty universally beloved uh, by the public. Not somebody who was looked down upon, but rather somebody who was considered kind of just a wonderful spark of joy in that industry, who had just gone through a lot of really tough times. And to have her finally die very suddenly and tragically as well because of the situation with her mother, who passed soon after, who was also very very much beloved. I think the thing about it that bothers me isn't killing off the character of Princess Leia. I don't think that would have bothered Carrie Fisher to kill off the character. And it doesn't bother me that she doesn't have a ton of scenes, because I think that you have to in some way write the character out to be respectful. What bothers me is that they leave effectively the dead body of this real woman, or something that is like an effigy of it, on screen repeatedly. Like there's a whole cut in the film where it's just Maz Kanata looking at Leia's dead body, or rebels gathered around Leia's dead body. And that
Or
that
Pearl
is what
going
icks me
to
out.
her body. Yeah.
I do not like that. That is too much, and it feels like a symbolic just
exploitative.
dragging her corpse back onto the stage. I don't like it. It
Yeah.
bugs me, and I do think it's exploitative. I think, first of all, if you're gonna have one scene where you kill off the character in some way, just have it be a single scene of characters mourning the character, and then you move the film on. Because to keep coming back to it and to have it be belabored, like when Poe comes back and Commander Dacey's trying to tell him that something's happened, and there's like this whole process of breaking the news to him. It's such an open wound in the film and in the audience that I genuinely do not like it. And I remember sitting for the first time ever in a Star Wars film, sitting in the theater looking at the screen on the opening weekend, and just being like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. This is weird.
And it really doesn't help that, like, it's like in the movie, her death, the death of Leia, and also by implication, the death of Carrie Fisher, is what turns Kylo back to the light. So
Yeah.
it's such like,
I mean, has anybody
just-
talked about that as well? That everybody said that George Lucas was misogynistic for years because Padme dies of a broken heart. But she's a victim of misogyny. Her husband chokes her out and then siphons her life force using his spirit powers. Whereas, like, Leia is literally written to just die for her son. Like, that doesn't bother
like
anybody. I don't know. Like,
yeah, and like in the last movie, like it's kind of okay, well, in the last movie, like Luke tells her that like nobody's ever really gone after like she says that like she like kind of like has digested the fact her son is gone.
mhm.
But like that doesn't mean that like she has to like die for him. Like
Also, it
and
seems like what she does in dying is she facilitates uh, uh, Kylo having a conversation with Han. This is like the most anti Bechdel test movie ever. They kill off this beloved female character and keep her body on screen specifically to facilitate a conversation between two male characters. That is, I don't know. That's just weird.
It's also a really bleak moment for Princess Leia as a character because Princess Leia at this point has lost everything that she's ever cared about as a person. She's lost everybody she's ever known. She's lost her best friend. She lost her entire the political project that she spent the entirety of her life supporting, the New Republic. First turned its back on her, then turned its back on her again in an even more dramatic fashion. And finally she just dies. It's so sad. Leia's done so dirty in these movies, and it's not really like, I mean, it kind of is the fault of the way the movies are built, but like, it's so bleak that I don't know. I like
It's
Princess Leia a lot. I'm
yeah.
a big Leia fan, and thinking about why it puts a pit in my throat to watch those movies, like the original trilogy now, knowing that like everything Leia was working for is just gonna evaporate, and like evaporate fast.
It's really rough to have a character who's such a take charge character in every other way just kind of slowly fade, um it literally and figuratively, from this film franchise, where when she's reintroduced, she's a lot more restrained than her younger self, but she definitely still has kind of a no nonsense air about her. And then in the next film, she has to be the mature one and the intelligent one, and the conscious one when everybody else is being reckless. And in the third one, I don't know. This film feels like they thought it couldn't be bad because it was a Star Wars film, or they thought it didn't matter. And I think you got to give them credit. They're a bunch of assholes. They made a bad Star Wars movie. Like I don't. By the way, I don't mean the actors or the crew are assholes. I mean like the people behind this, like executives behind this, who were like, yeah, this seems about right. This looks good. Let's do this. Um, the right thing to do was just start over. And it's an incredible amount of work, and it's a lot of wasted money, but it's the right thing to do, and it's the thing to do that gives your film integrity. And to instead have this shorter production schedule where they slap things together and just try to make it work, I just don't think it can. But we'll let
Rise of Skywalker is so trash on so many levels. I guess the good news is that after the Princess Leia stuff, I was so aghast every time she came on screen that everything else seemed like whatever. Like, yeah, it like violates the Star Wars canon or whatever, but like it's not an actual insult to a real person who died. You know, it's hard to really come up with like another criticism, I think, than the Princess Leia stuff, because it overshadows everything.
I got a few things written down. I'll conduct us through the middle act of this film.
All right.
So
I
Ray and
said
the
axe.
gang, yeah, Ray and the gang
Sorry.
go to Party Planet, and they meet Lando. Billy D. Williams is in this one. I like all the scenes with him in them. He is good. We get our "they fly now" banter.
They fly now?
When I saw that, I wanted to die. By the way, I
The what?
they fly now. They fly now.
See, the real thing to do would have just been bring Billy D. Williams in, give him basically all of Leia's lines, and have Darcy or whatever in the beginning say I've placed Leia on forced convalescent leave after her, after she got vented into space.
Yeah, or
General
you could have like
Calrissian but General Calrissian has joined us from the Alliance fleet. Bam, done.
Or she's on a diplomatic mission or something.
Or they can just like
Whatever.
cut to like a scene where like the photo with like the resistance crew in like the Falcon or something, and then like there's like a sad line where like it's kind of implied that she's gone. That's why isn't there, or anything. Anything would have been better than this. Like I feel the fact that like Leia's in this movie, just it's
Anyway,
the way,
Fasana. Billy D. Williams.
Yes. So we mentioned earlier some of the stuff where like the Knights of Ren show up, but they don't really do anything. We get the scene with Rey and the TIE fighter with Kylo in it. But that scene feels a little weird because he kind of like crashes, and then they have a contest with her, and then they just kind of slip away because they go into the sand. But this is where we get the Chewie death fake out. It happens pretty quick, so you don't even really get a lot of time to mourn the death of this character before they just reveal like, no, don't worry, he's alive, which is all right. But in the process of rescuing him, they end up going to the other planet, where they meet Poe's friend, the lady
Zori
Blitz, I believe. Yeah.
Zori Bliss, yeah.
She's pretty cool. Babu Frick, he rules. I love Babu Frick. And we get another death fake out on this planet where C-3PO like loses his memory and won't remember his friends anymore. And then later they back up his memory and basically it's fine. So that there's not a lot of consequences to our actions here is kind of a pretty frequent thread of the plot of this film.
Even Babu Frick and Zori Bliss are alive because Kajimi, the planet they're on, which is a pretty cool planet. It's got kind of like a Tibetan vibe.
Oh yeah,
it's completely vaped.
That's the third death fake out. Is Zori Bliss shows up at the end of the film again with a big hurrah with Babu Frick, and they're alive. So there's three. There's three. That's kind of incredible. I don't even know how does it happen? No, sorry, there's four. Because Kylo gets up at the end, he climbs out of the chasm. I mean, you knew that was going to happen, but even so,
he does seem like he dies at the end.
Yeah, I mean, you know he's not dead because there's no way. But like,
well, I'm not sure there's any way to get Adam Driver back into this franchise. I mean,
either way,
maybe a bajillion dollars, but I mean, he's making good movies.
Yeah. Well, okay, so then. We find out Hux is the spy. General White Pride kills Hux pretty unceremoniously. Then they go find the Death Star using the dagger. Kind of silly. And I have this note. The Falcon crashes, and we totally don't even see why when they land on Endor.
It might not be Endor.
It's Endor. It's one of the moons.
Yeah.
No, Endor is the planet. The forest moon of Endor this might be a different planet, although it might be the forest moon.
It might be a different. I don't know if it's like if it has multiple moons or not. It doesn't really matter.
There's also the whole issue of like the Death Star basically blowing up, and then somehow like there's huge chunks of debris that ends up on the moons of Endor or something.
Yeah. Not something conveyed with the visual language of Return of the Jedi.
It looks like it's gone. It's fucking gone.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of. I see the appeal of like the climbing around in the interior of the decayed Death Star ruins. I like that. I like that visually. So I guess they just worked back from the wouldn't it be cool if we did that? But yeah, the Falcon, they do land the Falcon on that planet or moon, have you? They crash for some reason. We don't even see why.
People forgot how to fly.
Yeah, it just happens. They meet Finn's new friend, who is sort of hinted at the end to be affiliated with Lando, or they have some sort of relationship.
Yeah, sexual.
Listen, he's got swag, WD. He's got the swag. Okay, you can't. Yeah. Listen.
Yeah.
He Finn talks to the other lady. They have these creatures they ride around on, space horses, and they're all
I forgot about that.
stormtroopers.
Yeah.
You get a pretty cool nature versus technology moment in this film. That's kind of neat. Okay, yeah, and then Rey and Kylo have a confrontation after he finds the little thingy that leads to Palpatine. That's when Leia dies and Rey wins the fight, but she heals Kylo. She goes into exile. Kylo talks to Han. Rey lands on the planet that Luke was on.
Octo.
Yeah. She burns Kylo's TIE fighter, but Luke kind of stops her in the process. Get the lightsaber catch moment when she throws it, which is neat. Little fan service there. And also, again, when he lifts the X-Wing out of the ocean, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever. With this, at this point in the movie, I've seen people complain, oh, the X-Wing. The whole point of showing the X-Wing in episode 8 is to show there's no way to get off the planet because the X-Wing is totally fucking trashed. But now in episode 9, we're showing it to be like, actually, it's fine. It kind of undercuts the twist of episode 8.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is not under that much water and also sealed for the vacuum of space. So it might be okay, you know.
I guess it is.
But I think it's more just a visual language to convey that Luke has no intention of leaving because there's no urgency of raising the X-Wing. He's just left it there. So we get Leia's lightsaber, which is important for the trick that Rey and Kylo pull to help him beat the Knights of Ren later, which is a short and implausibly silly fight. What else? Rey goes to Palpatine. And initially, he's trying. There's the cool Sith choir. That's kind of neat. All the Death Stars. Implausibly large fleet with way too many people and too much construction, too much money.
Mexico is great. The soundstage planet.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's what I like about it. That's the thing that I'll.
The cheapest planet.
It is neat. Rey can't kill Palpatine, or he takes over, which I guess is sort of how him reviving via the Sith is supposed to work. So she'll become evil if she kills him. Kylo shows up to help. She gives him the lightsaber using the Force dyad. And then Finn and company, Poe and the Resistance show up to help. Finn and his new ex-stormtrooper friends, they get on the animals and they rush the tower that is coordinating the ships. Palpatine stops Kylo and Rey as they're teaming up, and he realizes they have a dyad. He uses it to heal himself, at which point his plan seems to change, and he's just like, yeah, fuck it, the Emperor's back, baby. He does a cool Force Lightning thing.
Force Storm.
Yeah.
Not quite as cool, but it's Force Storm from Dark Empire.
It's pretty neat.
Big Dark Empire fan? Anyone love Dark Empire? Anyway.
I've read it. Everybody shows up to help. Big emotional moment. Lando kind of leading the charge. I like that. That's cool. Rey kind of starts dying because she stops Palpatine. There's that whole, like, I am all of the Sith, I am all of the Jedi line, which just feels, again, like Abrams kind of reverse engineering the elements of his film to, like, work in some sort of endpoint. I don't know why Palpatine would say I am all of the Sith. I don't know what he gets out of that conception, but Either way, he says that, she says that, she deflects the lightning back at him, a la Mace Windu, and kills him, shreds him, shreds his ass. But
fully exploded.
Yeah, she's mortally wounded. Kylo Ren climbs back up, heals her, they kiss, he dies, and then we get kind of a big party at the end. Small gay kiss, kind of in the crowd, and then aggressive heterosexual mapping of Poe Dameron and Zori Bliss, which was just a heartbreaking moment for me. By the way, J.J. Abrams teased in the media ahead of the release of this film that it had a gay kiss in it. Fuck off, J.J. You asshole.
Yeah, that
completely teasing us with Finn Poe.
And then Finn, Poe, and Rey all hug platonically.
Yeah,
These movies are so sexless.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like,
in that Disney Marvel way.
You
get the sense that you get the sense in these movies that like people kiss each other on the lips as like in the Star Wars universe as like a socialist fraternal kiss. It's not a sexual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as Princess Leia as Spicy Brezhnev.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the final beat of this trilogy and of this movie is Rey Skywalker and her yellow lightsaber burying the sabers on Tatooine, seeing Force Ghost Luke and Leia, looking off into the sunset.
It's pretty funny to imagine that with like the sort of the Tatooine lore that's sort of been built up in the shows, that like Tatooine is kind of having a boom town. So like the idea is that like Tatooine is like way out in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, it's funny to imagine her doing that like 30 minutes away from a suburban development.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I guess that's the Lars farm, so maybe it's just been abandoned. I guess that one house nobody goes in. Kind of interesting, I guess.
I don't know. If there were a couple of moldering, burned skeletons in front of a house for a couple of until the
Womp Rats took.
I think I would stay away.
Yeah. All right. What do we think, everybody? Star Wars sequel films.
Episode 8 was really good. Episode 7 was like as bad as it can get while being still a movie. Episode 9 is it's
so awful.
It's indescribable.
I think if you spoke English, the CIA would get a lot of use out of this at like Guantanamo Bay. I think if they just like played the audio from this film through the speakers of your prison cell, the sound system
continually,
like 24/7 with only small breaks to lull your brain and then shocking you again with They Fly Now.
Episode 9 is so awful. It's just so.
It is unrankable. Like it's when we're talking about episode 7 is as bad as it can get for it to not disqualify itself as a Star Wars movie. Like we aren't even conceiving of episode 9 when we're saying that, because ontologically episode 9 is like it's its own thing.
So little is communicated to the audience about what is actually happening during the events of this movie that even like accepting that it happened in the Star Wars universe just like means nothing, because none of the information on like who the Final Order are, who General Pride is, look, none of the movie never explains to us why Palpatine is here or what Exegol is. So like. Even like I know some people say like, oh, it just didn't happen in my picture of the Star Wars universe, but like even accepting that it does, like it really doesn't tell you anything about like there's nothing to like comment on in episode 9.
Yeah, because
it's so random. It feels like a history. It feels like if you animated a sidebar in a history book. Like I feel like we're only getting like every third sentence from this series of events.
It's I think this film temporarily killed Star Wars films. I think Disney saw this and they were like, shit. Like I don't know if we can just maybe I'm this is just my perspective, but it kind of seems like this film came out and there was a backlash against it, and maybe they didn't. I don't know how much money it made, but like I don't even know that much about film to contextualize it. I just don't think it's very good. I think it's bad.
COVID happened too,
Yeah.
and then they came out with Mandalorian, which was kind of a hit. They pivoted to TV shows. So Star Wars started out as like a riff on Flash Gordon, and now it's basically Flash Gordon, which is fine. Mandalorian gets a lot of shit for being like a monster of the week, glub shitto show these days, but like, you know what? Whatever. It looks great. It's 45 minutes, you know. Andor is really good. Andor is it's gonna be really funny if they do more stuff in like the vein of Andor, because I think conceptually having to make like Legos for that kind of content is really funny, you know. Like we should talk about Andor at some point, but
I need to watch it.
they decided, what if we made a movie for adults, except there's no sex in it, nobody fucks, which sucks. Andor should have had a sex scene, a hate sex scene between Mon Mothma and Slime Moore. Okay, I think we're running out of things to. I'm running out of things to say.
Sorry about that. I very quickly had to get up and run to the bathroom because this recording has lasted for 3.5 hours, and I've been drinking water this whole time. So I had to piss so hard I sounded like I was frying chicken. I was gonna pee my pants if I sat here for any longer. All right, that's it, everybody.
All right, on that note, I think that's about as good a review of episode 9 as you can give.
Yeah, it's
it's
who was it that said that some stories don't have like heroes? They're just ugly and disgusting from beginning to end, something like that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I also feel that ironically, like episode 8, the way that movie ends, basically, it means that in all honesty, you can recommend somebody just skip episode 9 and not watch that and consider episode 8 where it ends. And that's satisfying as like a story. It really is, which it shows that like how bad this movie is, that like you can actually do that in all earnest and nothing of value would be lost. In fact, I feel like nobody in their right mind would recommend trying to like get someone to Star Wars and be like, yeah, you gotta watch episode 9. Like it's gonna be every time that like there's gonna be a new Star Wars fan, you know, a friend is trying to get someone else, you know, a new friend to Star Wars. There's going to be the talk about episode 9 and why. Just you can read the Sparks note on it, on what happens in it, but like, just don't. Really don't. Just enjoy the ride for the 8 movies and then everything else, but don't watch that movie. There's nothing there.
It's such a bleak movie. And I think the thing about it that like sticks with me is that they made a big point about how the people of the galaxy didn't come to save the rebellion in episode 8. And in episode 9 they do. And it makes the galactic community, it makes like the people of the Star Wars universe just feel kind of like they don't care. They just love fighting. Like they'll just fight anybody for no reason. All the important stuff to beat the Final Order happens like off screen, kind of. I don't even know if the Citizens Fleet, like they bring a bajillion spaceships. Like, does that even matter? Do they even fight the Star Destroyers? Because it seems like they mostly got destroyed by Palpatine, but like for no reason. It seems like Palpatine just it built a bajillion Star Destroyers with super lasers on them, and then blew them up.
He's an interesting one, that Palpatine.
Yeah.
And it's what can you even talk about? What is there to say? I like Star Wars. I like the aesthetics of it. I like what it has to say, but wow, it can be done so badly. And Star Wars fans are just awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's awful.
And
Except
on
The
that
Last
note,
Jedi. The Last Jedi
yeah,
was good.
it was good. Yeah, hopefully we can get something like that again at some point.
One day,
But
Rian Johnson will direct his trilogy and we'll have some real art.
uh,
Finally, some
please,
good fucking food.
yeah, please.
Ryan Johnson, it's gonna be the same fucking thing though. Like I love Ryan Johnson, but his movies are just like spunky woman of color beats the shit out of rich white arrogant assholes, which is fine. It's just like a fine plot. I
They'll
like it.
probably
I like it in
stop
episode
doing
8.
them when people stop getting mad about them.
Yeah, it would feel kind of samey if it was the same kind of plot in 3 more Star Wars movies.
Yeah. That's not really the plot of Last Jedi.
Not really.
Not at all.
Well, it's the Rose, it's the whole Finn and Rose subplot.
Yeah, I suppose. It'll be great. I can taste it. One of these days we'll do another Star Wars movie. And
one of these days.
When we do, it will be
Going
a
into the
Hanging Fruits
theater.
podcast about it.
Going into the theater with my fingers crossed, like, come on.
It can't be that bad again. Alright, that's it. Good night, everybody.
All right.
See you around.
Good night.
Good night.